This is what's making him blink.
See, I thought he was trying to do Morse code with his eyelids, because I've always wanted to learn Morse code in a situation where I was a hostage, and maybe they're recording some sort of video, and I could do Morse code back to my family to tell them the address or something like that.
Give me the best you got. Do you know Morse code?
Yeah.
Okay. You're selling it, but you don't actually know Morse code, do you?
I just said I'll take a double-double
You didn't say that.
I did.
No.
I did. No pickles, too.
No.
Look it up. Look it up. Viewers, look it up. I couldn't see anything on the surface bumping into the structure. Guys joined me along the railing, having heard the noise themselves. One of them, Hay, spoke in a panicked Korean to his crewmates, pausing only for the next thud. Every thud sent him to a new level of alarm, and soon his crewmates tried to get him to settle down. Lee made his way over and said something stern to Hay, and Hay spun on his leader. Hay waited until the next thud, then lunged at Lee. The other men and I all jumped to pry the men apart. 4 of us couldn't loosen Hay's grip until the next thud, when Hay relaxed and paused to listen. We seized our moment and dragged the man off of Lee. Hay looked around confused, then heard the next thud and began to weep. 2 men walked him inside as I helped Lee up.
These thuds are causing a lot of problems.
What just happened? What just happened?
You just got to put on some noise-canceling headphones and...
That's what I was saying. Do a little Estes method up there.
Yes.
By yourself.
Yeah. I go far away when we do that.
This is why you got to carry a spirit box and headphones with you at all times, just in case you need to distract yourself.
You keep trying to justify that however you like.
I mean, it's a good idea.
Sure.
I'd be surviving and talking to your ghosts after you died.
It's true.
Think about it. On his feet, Lee looked at me. More problem. Big, he said, and motioned for me to follow him. I got to my feet as the platform vibrated with another thud. Inside the control room, 2 of Lee's men huddled in a far corner, like they were afraid the switches were going to bite them. I glanced at the monitors and realized Lee hadn't even started the reboot. Sensing my anger rising, Lee put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Look." Lee flipped the breaker, and on a monitor, a message flashed. 0%, 1%, 2%. Then, a thud sounded across the room. Inside, it seemed louder, seemed to last longer. It felt almost deliberate. I shook my head and looked back to the monitor, but it was off. The thud had interrupted the restart. Well, I mean, whatever this thing is, I guess knows they were trying to restart the oil. Oh! I think the oil rig, the drilling, makes a lot of noise, obviously, so this thing isn't able to, like, do its little monster stuff.
It's an oil daddy.
Yeah.
We ran into one of these before on Are You Scared?
An oil daddy?
An oil daddy. We've had oil rig drama on Are You Scared before.
We have, you're right.
It's rich territory because it's a scary place to be an oil rig. And I believe they woke up an oil daddy deep in the depths.
That's correct.
Yeah. This almost feels like a spiritual successor to that.
Maybe.
I hope we have so many oil rig stories by the time this series comes to a close 65 years from now.
65 years, 65 oil daddies.
Yeah.
Collect the whole set. We'll stop playing cards. No restart. All times. Lee tried once more to restart the panel, but when the next thud sounded, the system shut itself back off. If the noise didn't stop, it appeared we were going to be without electricity, unable to drill, and without communication. Weird that they ordered the priority of that. Unable to drill first, without communication second.
You know,
I guess if you're a driller,
they're
you gotta be
consummate drillmen. You understand, though, that they're not each drilling.
They're not out there on like a jackhammer in the sea like this?
No, the whole unit itself is one giant drill.
No, I know, but wouldn't it be funny if they were all out there like...
On what? The surface of the water?
It'd be like one of those very long drills. You know how like in Mario when he's like floating and doesn't he have like a big drill he sits on?
I don't think Mario sits on a big drill, but I could be mistaken.
No, you're probably right, but he should.
Is there a Mario where he drills for oil? Is that a thing?
You know, it might be.
Super fracking
Imagine
Mario.
these guys. Imagine these guys drilling to that underwater theme. I looked at Lee and tried to remain calm. We told Kadal we were restarting. When we don't radio back in 6 hours, they'll send the supply ship early, probably with some extra engineers and new generators. A day and a half, 2 nights without electricity. We'll be fine. Lee's face just stared at me in confusion. Not only would communication with the mainland be impossible, but communication between the 3 teams on board would be as well. Over the rest of the day, the thudding only got more intense. People stopped playing cards and reading. In the silence between thuds, all you could do was brace your mind against the next thud. Even the massive drill structure seemed exhausted.
Would you get on a little boat and just leave?
I think I would. I mean, if you're in the deep sea, I don't think a dinghy is going to cut it.
How far?
Well, especially if you got some sort of monster down there. I mean, what do these guys
They
think
gotta
these...
get to and from the place.
Well, what do they think these thuds
well,
are?
you
It could be just like
yes
big
to a
waves,
bit,
I
please.
guess.
Kaiju?
A kaiju? Like the kaiju?
So just one? I thought kaiju was just a sort of.
It is, but there is like Godzilla would be like the kaiju.
He's the big guy.
Huge.
Something stirring in the deep.
The thud throbbed around us, and all we could do was wait for the next one. By dinner, morale was deteriorating. Men began whispering in all three languages, theorizing about the thud. A whale, a giant squid, mermaids. Guys drew pictures to tell the other crews about their theories. One of Lee's men started scribbling a solid circle, dark and hard. He tore a hole in the paper and kept drawing on the table underneath. When Lee said something to him in Korean, the man stood bolt upright. He grabbed 4 plates of food from the guys around him and stormed out. All of the Koreans...
He's stacking? You grabbed 4 plates?
Oh, I guess. I don't know why he's grabbing them.
It's like, it's funny because he is like, that's a disturbing thing to see. A man just drawing a circle and then standing up. But then for him to be like,
I'm counting on you, friend.
But what if he started twirling all 4 of them?
well, that's
Then
impressive.
you'd be like, this is entertainment.
Yeah.
Keep drawing your little Doctor Strange portals on the paper. I don't care. As long as you keep twirling them plates, buddy.
Sort of a classic, like, child in a horror movie thing, right?
Drawing circles.
Not unlike the hole that they're drilling.
All of the Koreans but Lee ran after him. Lee turned to me and says it's hungry. I got to the deck just as Lee's man threw the 4th plate down. We all peered over the side. Though without the lights, we lost sight of the food as the sunset glinted off the sea.
Oh, I didn't realize he's throwing food into the ocean?
Yeah, because he said it says it's hungry.
I guess I'm imagining, the drill is probably a big hole.
Yeah.
He's throwing little plates of
Yeah, whatever would be down there would probably be giant.
chicken piccata.
Yeah, they're not gonna...
I don't think that's what it wants.
Chicken tenders ain't gonna
I
get
feel
it.
like the hole wants to eat people.
Like, imagine if, like, you were angry and to appease you, some ants gave you, like, ant food.
Yeah. You'd be like, I'm starving, and you gave me a little breadcrumb or
It's like a little tiny version of popcorn. Actually,
something.
that sounds pretty good.
LTP.
I would just lick them up with my tongue like a dog. I turned to go back to the mess hall, but stopped. Behind me was Yuri, wide-eyed and drooling. He started speaking Russian at me at a frantic pace. Spit flew from his mouth as his voice got louder. Suddenly, the platform let out another thud, and Yuri's head snapped back to a sickening extent. It looked like he had broken his neck, but his head lolled back around, still yelling Russian. Another thud, and his head again snapped at another unnatural angle. I yelled for help. Something was seriously wrong. You think?
Something's a little weird here.
Guys, Yuri just turned himself into a Pez dispenser. I think there might be something wrong, and there's no Pez coming out of his neck. You don't like Pez?
It's one of my favorite things in the world.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
It's so satisfying.
Eat it without the guy. I don't even need the guy. I just eat the pellets.
That's probably a dated reference at this point. I don't think they even sell Pez.
No, they're out there. I bought a Trolls one recently.
As men gathered around, the platform rang with the loudest thud yet. Yuri's head snapped so far back. Oh, God! Okay, this gets so much worse. I thought it was over.
He's still snapping.
He's still pop-locking, paranormally, that is. Yuri's head snapped so far back that the skin around his throat split, shooting a thin sheet of blood over the deck.
Oh, my God.
I think he's gonna die.
I feel like if I wanted it to split, I'd have to go pretty far back there, though.
I don't think you could do it.
No.
With his head still cocked backwards, Yuri started sprinting towards me. I ducked to the side, and Yuri leapt over the railing, falling 100 feet into the sea. I know this is obviously horrific. It is kind of funny to imagine somebody with their head just like all the way back while sprinting, and their head's just...
Your group
I just
simply
saw that sentence.
involved
What do you think the
over
next thing they
stage.
did was after they watched Yuri snap his own neck, slit his own throat, and jump over the railing?
Throw him a life preserver.
Hear that? We threw the lifesavers down, but it was hopeless.
No, he doesn't seem to want that.
He was having trouble standing on land.
Yeah, put the wall,
I wonder what we should do. Yuri was gone, leaving only Lee and me in charge of our island of unknowable
go.
horrors in the middle of nowhere. That night, no one got any sleep. It wasn't the thudding that kept us awake, but imagining what was causing it. Earplugs didn't help. Music didn't help. By the morning, we weren't just hearing the noise. We could feel it. I don't buy that music didn't help. It's fucking bullshit.
Put on Pitbull.
Yeah, you put on some Mr. 305, you're having a great
Doing
day.
all right.
You put on some Sugar Ray every morning,
Oh, baby.
there's no way I'm not going to be smiling. I'm going to
Yeah.
be like, all right, Mark.
Yeah.
You know, fight
That's
back.
how you fight the whole.
You fight the whole back.
I think it's safe to say that in our lives, metaphorically, we've all got a hungry hole.
We all have a hungry hole.
You know, there's a hungry hole in your life, and you gotta fight it.
We could see the metal around us vibrate with it. If you closed your eyes, you swore you could taste it.
Feed the hole, taste the hole.
The hole is near. I could feel it. I could even taste it. Men started moving about aimlessly, walking from one side of the deck to the next. Marching in a circle was all we could do.
That's not all you can do.
You can do so many more things. Your solution is to just walk around in a circle?
It sounds like they're getting hole build.
Yeah. We just needed to make it through this day. Then sometime in the night, the supply ship should arrive. Everyone had stopped speculating about what was making the noise. We all just wanted it to stop thinking about it for even 1 minute. Would this drive you insane, by the way?
It sounds like it's doing that.
Well, I mean, but I feel like you have a pretty strong mind.
I think I'd be one of the last to slit my own throat and jump off the ledge, yeah. You know, I'd be a bit of a holdout, but,
A holdout.
But, yeah, I think I'd get there eventually.
I'd give myself a day before I lost it.
I'd give into the hole.
You always have to give into the hole at the end.
Hey, you said.
After lunch, the chef took Lee and I aside and told us a couple of his knives had gone missing. We told him to lock the rest up until the supply boat came, but the look he gave us made it clear he didn't trust us. You want to hear, like, the salami's missing or something like that, but, like, his, like, stabbing stuff? No.
Yeah, knife's bad, yeah.
At dusk, one of Lee's men started walking with a sledgehammer across his back. Everyone kept to himself now. Even the men who could understand one another weren't talking. Everyone exchanged threatening looks, some even baring teeth, mumbling to themselves. It was like a mental assault on patience. Minutes passed in a panicked daze. The thud would ring out, and I would be staring out across the ocean. Then I'd have no memory until another thud, when suddenly I was facing a wall in a supply room. Another thud, and I was in the control room, holding a knife I'd never seen before.
Fugue states.
Yeah, fugue states, yeah.
Thuds happening, you're sort of forgetting where you are. And Yuri jumped off. I'm surprised it didn't affect more people quicker. It seems like...
Maybe a couple other jump off, you're saying? Or
yeah, I'm crazy now, too. Here I go.
Doesn't seem like anybody was particularly sad that Yuri died either. I mean, they threw a life preserver. That's the least you could do. No one was like, I'm sad.
They didn't have a little funeral, but they got thuds to worry about.
That's how quickly you'd forget me, huh?
Knives are going missing. Salami's going missing. You think I'm worried about your dead ass? All due respect.
Another thud. The knife was gone, and I was sitting on the deck, feet dangling over the edge. In one moment of lucidity, I scrawled on my arm, supply ship. Someone had to remember help was on the way. With night, men were openly weeping across the platform, tearing at their hair, pulling at clothes. Brutal fights were breaking out. The man with the sledgehammer dislocated Lee's shoulder with it, and Lee started going for the man's eyes. No one stepped in. Men would fight until the next thud, then turn as if nothing had happened and shuffle off. Some were bleeding from huge gashes, though they hardly seemed to notice. With every thud, I was less clear where I was, who I was. The only thing that would bring me back was the supply ship reminder on my arm. Well, I mean, if you're seeing your little reminder works, why not tell the rest of the group? End of thuds.
End of thuds?
Yeah, well, if you just write in your arm, thud's not real.
Well, thud, I think, is real.
No, but if you remind yourself that, like, hey, don't...
We're waiting for something. Don't worry about the thuds. Stop tearing each other's eyeballs out.
Yeah, stop
weeping.
Exactly. Around 2 a.m., Lee hollered. Flickering barely on the horizon was a light. The supply ship. It was here. Our nightmare was almost over. The thudding, however, began to change. What was already unbearable became even worse. Each thud felt like it came from inside your own brain, shaking your bones from the marrow. Thuds came more rapidly, like an excited heartbeat. With white knuckles, we gripped the railing and focused on the ship, moving steadily towards us through the clear night. Down! Lee's voice sounded afraid as he pointed to the surface of the sea below our platform. There, swirling around the support columns, we could just make out the form of a wave, moving in circles around the structure. I looked up to the supply ship. I could make out the man moving about on its deck. It was almost here.
Hole gonna eat the ship.
Hole might eat the whole
Hungry
structure.
hole, you feed it a ship? Ooh.
Maybe there's no, like, thing below. It's just, like, the Earth itself is making strange noises
Mother Gaia.
to make people go nuts. Like, Earth is, like, fighting off the infection.
Mother Gaia.
Yes. What does that mean?
Mother Gaia.
Okay. Is that like something from, like, Avatar or something?
Gaia.
Suddenly, the wave shot away from the platform, straight towards the supply ship. As the wave moved away, a huge weight felt like it had been suddenly lifted from my brain. I shook my head, relief flooding my mind and body. The thudding had stopped.
Well, this is good news, though.
No, I don't think so.
It sounds like good news. I think we've got ourselves a happy ending here.
I think it's going to the supply ship, and now it's going to fuck them up.
Oh, the thud's gonna be like, hang on, guys. Go over to the supply ship. Thud, 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 thud. All the people on there go, kill themselves. That comes back. Okay.
I looked out to the supply ship, now only minutes from us. The wave was almost to it, but that hardly seemed to matter. The ship was large. The wave wasn't anything it wouldn't easily pass over. When the wave was almost to the boat, the water suddenly went still. The wave, it appeared to our beleaguered eyes, had simply vanished. The boat continued towards us, and the other men on deck, now free from the thudding, waved their arms and yelled in delirious excitement. As the boat got to within shouting distance, something inexplicable happened. The enormous boat, without hitting anything or even stopping, suddenly vanished beneath the water, as if it had been sucked down to the bottom of the ocean floor in an instant. I told you, hole gonna get filled somehow. Big boat?
Yeah.
No more big boat.
It sounds like a big boat.
If it was able to suck that boat down,
It sucked a boat.
why wouldn't it just suck the oil rig down? Why was it toying with these guys?
I think it's tough to suck a rig.
Boat,
Easy suck job.
easy suck job, but rig way up here.
That's a tough
It's
sucker.
gonna take a couple big
It's a
sucks.
tough suck.
At least 3 sucks.
Yes.
Well, let's see if the rig's gonna get sucked. We all stood stunned, staring at the bubbling ocean where our salvation had been floating only seconds ago. There was no debris, no men, no evidence a boat had ever been there. When the ocean smoothed back over, all that was there was a wave, moving in tight little circles. After a minute, the wave crept slowly back to our platform, where it plunged beneath the surface. A deafening thud sounded out.
God! Ow! You hate to hear the thud come.
We got one more sentence here.
Oh!
And then it went away, and we're all good.
Oh!
No. Whatever reprieve we had from the unknowable horror, it was over now. Wait, what? Is it all good? Wait, it is good. They made it out unsucked. I guess. No?
One more time.
Whatever reprieve we'd had from the unknowable horror, it was over now. Oh!
No reprieve. No
they're-
reprieve.
They're gonna die. Yeah.
They're gonna die.
It was comma. It was over. It's over for us now, not it was over now.
Yeah.
You know.
Game over.
That would be funny if that's how it actually happened to them. They're like, oh, we're gonna live. Thud. No, we're gonna die. That's the end of the story.
Very sad.
What do you think the horror was? What do you think this
I think it's the hungry hole.
hole needs to be filled? Hole needs to be fed.
Hole will be filled.
Like a sad analogy for life.
Oh.
We're all just things to fill a hole. We will fill a casket-sized hole at some point.
Yeah.
And once you accept that, maybe you're okay being turned into a human pest dispenser.
I mean, ideally, that doesn't happen to you.
You don't always get what you want. There was a
That's
song,
true.
there was
You
a
got
song
one.
written about that.
Yeah.
Of all these deaths, which one would be the one that you would probably choose?
I go out like my man Yuri.
Decapitating yourself?
Why not?
Getting hit by a sledgehammer?
You know, nice bit of sizzle before you go.
And his head's dangling. He's probably thinking, I've never seen the world from this vantage point
Yeah.
before. Look, I'm looking at my butt cheeks.
What a beautiful day.
Well, because his head's like hanging on the back of his
That's
like
true.
back. Or getting sucked down by a sentient wave.
Getting sucked to death. Yeah. Not bad.
That sounds horrible.
Well, this was a beautiful story.
Yeah, it was great. I'm glad we had time to discuss this beautiful
Yeah,
tale.
it was nice to spend this time with you and learn about these men.
So, are you scared?
You know what would kick ass is if they pulled out and they were in a giant toilet.
Yeah, dude, that's so much better. Because I was thinking, what if it was just like a giant shop vac, but
That's
much
not as
better.
good, a big
Not as
toilet.
good. Because sometimes you could use a shop vac to clean up water. I've done it
Yeah.
before, but like a toilet, that would mean.
That's how I would do it.
Shall we get out of here? That's
Is
it.
there a way out of here?
Well, for those of you who made it, see you next time. This episode of Are You Scared is brought to you by the narrative horror video game Still Wakes the Deep, out now and available on PC, Xbox Series X and Series S, and PlayStation 5.
No. Do better healing. Be a better healer.
This video contains content that some might find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Technology is a wonderful thing that provides connection in a fast world. A video chat between two people worlds apart, for example. But what if that connection is not one that you asked for? A connection to a person one step ahead with nefarious intentions. For our narrator, he finds himself in a game of cat and mouse where the roles are still to be decided. I'm Ryan Bergara, and this is the season finale of Are You Scared? A show where I tell my friend Shane Madej the internet's scariest stories that may or may not be true. Now, I have not read this story before, and neither has Shane. So lock your doors, turn off the lights, and let's see if we can make it until the end. The Phone Stalker. This happened on a warm Saturday evening when I was 14 years old. Everything I'm about to tell you is true. I've lived on the same corner in a small suburban town since I was young. It's a nice, normal community, barring an occasional scream or a gunshot ringing out in the night. I live with my mom, stepdad, and sister, but since she's 9 years older than me, I have always felt like the only kid in the house. The age gap taught me self-reliance, in terms of keeping myself occupied and entertained. I was also a nerdy little boy, not exactly into the party scene, so sneaking out was never a temptation. All that to say, my parents never worried about leaving me home alone, which is exactly why they felt comfortable leaving me alone on this particular night.
I relate to this protagonist right from the jump, a nerdy little boy. I was a nerd. Were you a nerdy little boy?
Well, you weren't a little boy, you were a nerdy boy.
I was a little boy. I hit a growth spurt.
You went from what, 6'1" to 7'4"?
Exactly right, yes.
How about being a homebody? Is that something you could relate to?
Being home is my favorite thing. I prefer
it
being
is.
home to most other things. It's where all your stuff is.
What if that home became dangerous?
Well, then that would be scary.
My sister was out of town, and my parents left for a party around 4:30 p.m. As soon as they got out of the driveway, I started blasting music through the Bluetooth speaker in the living room. I took a shower and put on some shorts and my favorite Friday the 13th hoodie, King of the Castle. I was living
The very definition of living large, taking a shower and putting on some shorts.
and also blasting music in your living room like no
Oh,
one's watching.
yeah.
When my roommates leave, I'm doing crazy stuff all over, you know?
What are you doing? What crazy stuff are you doing? Oh, let me guess. You're popping kernels.
I'm popping kernels, that's right, yeah. Naked.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just watch that oil.
Well, I know I have an oil protector. I have an oil cover on my popper, so
Love to hear that.
maybe making some bacon and eggs or something like that. Blasting film soundtracks as loud as I possibly can.
I'm imagining you got the popcorn popper going over here. You're
Yeah.
also making bacon and eggs for some reason. Buck-ass naked. The Dunkirk soundtrack blasting.
And I have like a cowboy kind of holster strap on. In each holster is a White Claw.
To clarify, that's the...
But still naked.
All right, yeah. Hey, living large.
I was walking downstairs to put on a movie when I heard a knock at the door. This was odd as I wasn't expecting anyone, and my family wouldn't be home for hours. I turned down my music and went to open the door. On the other side of the screen was a tall, lanky man with pale skin and streaky blonde hair. He had acne and looked to be only a couple years older than me. He was holding pizza and wings from the Domino's up the road.
Whoa, hell yeah.
You here to talk about Domino's?
Well, I'm here to talk about pizza showing up at your door when you didn't even order it.
A little unnerving to me if I'm home alone. then again, I tend to be on the more paranoid side, so I would think someone's trying to poison me. Order for Tessa, he said. My stomach tensed a bit. Tessa is my mom's name, but she wasn't home, and she doesn't like Domino's, so why would she order this? Maybe she realized there was nothing in the fridge and ordered me dinner? Either way, I said nothing and signed for the pizza. The pizza man handed over the goods and walked back down to his car at the end of the driveway. I turned to go inside, but then I stopped. I don't know how, but I could feel him looking at me. I looked over my shoulder, and sure enough, he was just standing by his car door, staring at me, expressionless. I quickly turned around, closed the door, and locked it behind me. This is actually something that's quite common, weirdly, that humans have almost kind of like this unconfirmed sixth sense. Have you ever felt like someone was watching you and then you look across the street and it's like, oh yeah, that SpongeBob character on Hollywood Boulevard is looking at me?
No, but I also just sort of dance through life, I'm not too worried about what other people are, if they're looking at me or not. I have the privilege of being a giant, tall man, so I'm not too worried. If anything, I'm trying to make other people feel comfortable by moving away from them, because I look like the Slender Man coming down the street. I don't want to spook anybody.
My phone started buzzing in my pocket. It was my boyfriend Jason, who conveniently lived down the street from me. We had been dating for 2 years, and he always called when I was alone to keep me company. This call was strange, though, because he instantly asked, "Who was the man at your house?" I froze, wondering how he could have known about the pizza delivery, but then realized it was not unlike him to go on walks past my house and send me pictures of my family outside on our patio, or me when I take out the trash. He must have just seen him as he walked by.
Hang on. Huh?
I mean, I guess it's kind of like a cutesy, like, hey, I saw you outside your house. You live down the street. Take a picture of them, be like, look, I see you. Kind of cutesy little games like that,
I don't know about that, especially if you're dating.
You've never seen Sarah sitting on the balcony taking a picture of her, and then when she sees the angle at which you're looking at her, she looks up and you're like sitting there waiting like with a funny face? I've done that to Mari before.
You know what? Maybe I can excuse it because I did take a very funny photo of you once where you were very zoned in at work and you looked dead.
We talked for about 5 more minutes before I told Jason I wanted to go take a nap and hung up. I was standing in our kitchen next to a big sliding glass door that provided a convenient view from the backyard of the whole downstairs portion of the house. The sun had set, and the darkness started to press in on the glass. My stomach turned, and once again, I had the weird sense that I was being watched. People who watch this show already know I have a fear of something watching me through the windows, and if you have like a big glass door like this that kind of gives a person like a command center view of your entire house, not a good situation to be in, especially if you think there's someone creeping around.
Yeah, I'll say to my parents' credit, growing up, my dad put cameras up all around the outside of our house. So in our family room, we had like our main television where we would watch movies and stuff, and then directly next to it was a smaller monitor that showed us every single angle of the outside of our house at all times.
Man, your dad built you panic room. To distract myself, I went into the living room and put on a scary movie. Counterintuitive, I know, but I liked watching horror movies, so this was normal for me. About an hour into the film, I heard a shuffling noise on the patio. My eyes darted to the sliding glass door. I wanted to get out of view from it, but somehow, the idea of taking my eyes off of it seemed even scarier. I held still for a bit to listen for more movement. But when nothing happened, tried to focus on the movie again. About 10 minutes later, I heard it again. This time, I thought I heard footsteps too. I got up, slowly. Reluctantly, I walked over to the big glass door and flipped the switch to the patio, flooding the backyard with light. Nothing. I was satisfied that there was nothing out there, but as I flipped the light off again, the darkness felt like it was pressing even closer. I walked back to the living room, feeling exposed as I turned my back to the glass door. About 5 minutes later, my phone received an airdrop from someone named Lover. I assumed it was Jason being an idiot, but when I opened it, it was a picture of me. A real real-time picture of me, standing in front of the big glass door in our kitchen, looking out into our yard.
Where's Jason? Fair question. Where's Jason?
What do you?
Where
oh, you
is
mean
his ass?
why is he not there with him to
Yes!
protect his boyfriend?
What's Jason doing?
I'll tell you what he's not doing: stopping his boyfriend from being murdered.
Yeah, sounds like it.
I nearly boiled over in anger. Jason knew I got scared easily, so creeping around outside to spook me was downright mean. I called him immediately, but he didn't pick up. I texted him, "You're such a dork. Go home, babe, or come inside," and gripped my phone tightly, waiting for some response back. I waited for a couple minutes, and my phone finally buzzed. It was Jason, and it was a snap of him getting out of the shower. My stomach dropped. I called Jason in a panic. "Someone airdropped me a picture of me looking out the patio door," I told him, now fully panicking. "It was only taken like 10 minutes ago. If it wasn't you, who was it?" He laughed at me. I could hear his voice echoing in his bathroom. "Baby, it's probably just a prank. Could be just Sarah who saw you," he said. Sarah lives in the house behind ours and could see into our backyard from her room. We'd chatted across yards before, but this still felt a bit odd for her to do. Still, that felt like the only reasonable explanation.
That's not a neighborly thing to do. Neighbors should be saying, "Hey, I can see you're home alone. Don't worry, I can see your backyard quite clear from here, and it looks good."
I talked to Jason for a bit longer to settle my nerves and calmed down. I went back to the couch and was able to watch the remainder of my movie without interruption. I started to relax and turned on some reality TV to zone out before I went up to bed. Just as I felt my eyes starting to close, my phone buzzed again. It was another photo from Lover. This time, the photo was taken from the patio itself, looking in through the big glass door. I could see myself distantly sitting, looking at the TV in the living room. I felt a prickling up the base of my spine, and all my hair stood on end, hoping that Jason was right and that this was some kind of sick joke. I sent back a photo of myself holding up my middle finger with the caption, "Nice try, Sarah." As soon as I sent it, I realized something that made my blood curdle. Sarah doesn't have an iPhone.
She has an Android.
This is why I would have a scarecrow in my backyard, because what I would do is I would walk outside into the backyard, stare directly into the direction of this person for a good minute or two, just like this.
Yeah.
And then I would unsheath my katana,
Oh.
and in the same motion, dismember the head of that scarecrow. It would be so clean. It's like one of the things where the head gets cut off, but it like doesn't even fall off immediately. It's like,
Yeah. This guy's out there in the bush being like, "That wasn't scary. It just made the head move a little bit." And the head's like,
exactly. Not only do I scare this guy into leaving my yard, but now my plants are fertilized because he's probably pooing himself, realizing he's dealing with a fucking samurai, baby.
"You're gonna have some juicy tomatoes come harvesting time, I'll tell you that."
Before I could completely comprehend what was happening, another photo came through. This time, it was just a photo of a knife with the caption, "No cops." I froze. I felt my face flush with panic. Someone was coming after me. I felt like I was in a horror film. Without losing another moment, I ran to the kitchen and closed the blinds and sprinted around the bottom floor, checking every single lock I could get to. My phone buzzed again. It was a close-up of my face through the kitchen window. I screamed and dropped my phone. My heart was racing. I was covered in sweat and uncontrollably shaking. I grabbed a large knife from our knife block next to the stove and picked up my phone. The only thing I could think to do was protect myself. I screamed again loudly, hoping a neighbor would hear, and ran upstairs to my bathroom, locking myself inside. I sat down in the dark and started to sob uncontrollably. I struggled to catch my breath without making any noise. I texted Jason what was happening and sent him the pictures. He called me. I answered, trying to stay as quiet as I could. "Jason, help me, I'm scared," I whispered. "Stay where you are, I'm getting help." He was breathing heavily. During the call, I received another photo. I accepted it with tears streaming down my face. It was a silhouette of a person, clothed in black, holding a brick in an outstretched hand. They were standing on my patio. I shrieked and dropped my phone. I could hear Jason still trying to ask what had happened. They were coming for me. I heard an explosive shattering of glass. I had run out of time. First off,
crazy.
this killer must have watched the film Scream, because this sounds
I was
a lot
gonna
like
say
Scream.
it's quite Scream-like. The airdrop is sort of the modern-day spooky phone call in a way.
It is kinda, yeah.
If Ghostface were operating now,
Yes,
this
he
is
would
what
be
he'd
airdropping.
do. You know that guy would be texting.
The first picture that gets sent of my significant other by someone that's not me, I'm driving down there, especially if I live down the block from this person.
Yeah.
Not to shit on Jason here, but I'm just saying that's what I would do. And guess what's gonna be in its holster? A fucking katana. Because that's what's gonna happen.
Until it's out of its holster, you know what I'm talking about?
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Because, baby, that metal is thirsty.
And sometimes I gotta quench it, okay?
Oh, you gotta quench it.
Whoever this was, they were now inside the house. My head started spinning as I started to feel my reality sinking in. I was going to die. I never got to live the life I wanted. Get married, have kids. Hell, I never even got my license. I silenced my phone, trying to stay as quiet as possible by slowing my breathing. The final photo appeared.
You know, I'm gonna play some Magic. I haven't
The
played
pizza
Magic
man,
in a minute. I'm gonna play
standing
some
in my dining room, holding a knife in his hand, smiling. My face went numb. I heard the wood creak from his steps downstairs. Frantically, I stood up and opened the blinds of the bathroom window, hoping to see someone on the street. Nobody. I thought about trying to climb through the window, but there would be nothing to break my fall but the hard driveway 1 story below. My racing mind was snapped back to reality by the sound of wood creaking loudly as the pizza man climbed up the stairs.
Oh,
It's
what
not very
the fuck
scary
already
to say
happened
as
now?
the pizza man climbed the stairs.
Oh, damn.
Like if
maybe
I
we're gonna
had
make
like
me
a
do
creepy
this.
call and I was like, what's your name? Why are you doing this? And he goes, I'm the pizza man.
I'd be like, cool.
I know you're about to murder me. Can we workshop this a little bit? I don't want it in the papers that I got killed by the pizza man.
Full admission here, I forgot about the pizza man. When you
Me too.
said it was the pizza man, I was like, oh yeah, that guy.
The guy from the first act. Every single time. I picked up the knife I had and aimed it towards the door. Each step he took sent chills through my body as I tried to brace myself, trying not to collapse. I was both numb and raw, adrenaline masking everything but his heavy plodding steps. I heard him reach the landing at the top of the stairs. I felt myself backing away from the door as far as I could, pressing into the tub. And then, it was silent. I couldn't hear his movement. I couldn't hear any movement. Suddenly, the doorknob started to slowly turn. It halted against the lock. I waited. He waited. A long moment of silence. My heart pounded in my ears. I screamed, "Go away! Leave me alone!" He started to laugh, low and rough. He sounded nothing like the gawky boy from before.
Oh, okay. I guess I was imagining like a ho 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 ho.
You sound like Alan Rickman in Die Hard. Now I have a machine gun. Haw, haw, haw. What if this guy just laughed like Seth Rogen outside there? With no alternative, I went for the window, trying to break it with the knife I held, but accidentally sliced my arm. I gasped in pain. I looked over and saw the knob turning again, and the door straining against its frame as he pushed against it, trying to get in. Acting purely on instinct, I dropped to the floor and peered under the door. His foot braced him as he pressed into the door, cursing at the knob.
Always funny to imagine being like, this fucking thing sucks. I'm trying to murder.
I grabbed my knife and stabbed with all my strength into the side of his boot. I heard him shriek in surprise and stumble back from the door. I seized my chance. I jumped up, unlocked the door, and ran as fast as I could. He swung at me. his knife slicing into my hand that protected my head as I sprinted. I could feel the pain spreading up my arm, but didn't look up. I leapt down the stairs, ran barefoot through the broken glass, out into the yard. I threw open the fence and ran out to the street. Holy shit.
That's a lot. We got a little Annie Lennox situation over here. A little stab in there. That's fun.
Yeah.
Love a little stab.
It's a tough day at the office for this murderer.
Yeah.
Thwarted by a common bathroom doorknob, and then got stabbed right in the side of a foot.
I like that he just apparently didn't plan for there to be doors in this house. Are you not like a bean family here? I was expecting beans. I'm also imagining a knife going into the side of a boot. That seems like a bad stab. Not that there's a good stab out there. There's not a place on my body where I'm like, yeah, stab me there, please. Stab me, daddy. You know, I don't want that. I'm imagining a knife going directly into the side of my foot.
I want up to you know what's even worse? The knife going into the boot, but at an angle so that it slices the back of your Achilles. And now you're just like,
Or now I'm also imagining it going directly, like, into the toe, like straight into the toes.
Oh!
That's also bad.
This guy said, I heard him shriek in surprise. I wonder what he shrieked. Do you think he was like, oh, shit! Why would you do that? Zoinks! Me supposed to stab, not you! When I got there, 2 cops pulled up with Jason and his dad. I started screaming for help and collapsed to my knees. Jason's dad scooped me up, and the 2 cops ran around the back. He put me in their car with Jason, and we waited for an ambulance with some neighbors who wrapped cloth around my feet and hands. Minutes later, the 2 cops emerged with the handcuffed pizza guy, his right leg limping and bleeding. He stared at me as they brought him to the squad car and put him in. I felt his cold eyes more than I could feel my own pain. The ambulance arrived, and they started treating my cuts. And finally, I felt myself fully let go and sob. My parents arrived a few minutes later, and I've never seen my stepdad cry so much. He was this big, tough macho man, so seeing him break down, I knew how scared he was for me. They ran over to the ambulance and hugged me tightly. They sat in shock as I told them everything that happened. They blamed themselves, but I never did. As for the pizza man, according to the police, he was a child predator who used his job to find victims at home alone. They grabbed him going through my closet upstairs after I'd run out. We watched the cops drive him away, and all the while, he never broke his gaze at me. So, are you scared? In the end, Jason did what he was supposed to do. He went and got help.
Jason, you are back in my good graces.
In fact, an apology is in order. I am sorry.
I apologize to you, Jason.
Let's find out now if this is a true story. Phone Stalker was submitted to us for this show by Julian Hernandez and is an experienced story. So this is a true story.
No!
Holy shit! Very horrifying that this is true. Really sorry to the narrator. That fucking sucks. That certainly is a hell of a way to end this season. Holy shit. There's some crazy people out there, folks. Make sure you lock in those doors. Thank you all for watching this season, and good night.
Sleep tight.
This video contains content that some might find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Have you ever lost touch with a friend? It's funny, the change that time can bring to a person, even someone you knew. But what if the transformation was so stark that your friend was basically unrecognizable? A metamorphosis so absolute that the life behind their once friendly eyes is now intrinsically different, perhaps even sinister or dangerous. For our narrator, how he answers that question may in turn change his life forever. I'm Ryan Bergara, and this is Are You Scared? A show where I tell my friend Shane Madej the internet's scariest stories that may or may not be true. Now, I have not read this story before, and neither has Shane. So lock your doors, turn off the lights, and let's see if we can make it until the end. Something got my friend.
That's crazy.
This happened some years back, and I've always been quick to push it off and try and forget about it. But a conversation I had recently inspired me to write my story out so people with more experience of paranormal/supernatural phenomena might tell me what I witnessed, if anything. This all takes place in northwestern Montana during the late autumn of 2009. When I was 17, I moved out of my parents' house and in with a coworker, John, in his trailer. We got along well at work and had been part of the same weekly D&D group for a while. It was actually one of the better roommate situations I've ever had, and we became close friends during that time. We were roommates until shortly after I turned 18, and some personal stuff happened with my family. I ended up moving back in with them for a while so I could help them cover some bills. It took about 3 months for that situation to stabilize, and I called John about moving back out there with him. This was the first time I remember feeling something was off. Though it's been so long, I can't remember the details of the conversation. Just a sense of wrongness that lingered for a while after I'd hung up the phone. Either way, John said I was welcome to move back in, which I expected. I waited for a day off, and another friend, Dave, came along to help me move. Dave was another D&D pal from a different group, and we were figuring we'd talk John into a one-shot session or something. So, we loaded up all my stuff and drove out there. What followed was a nightmare.
Ooh, I gotta say I'm loving all the D&D talk here. A one-shot sesh?
In layman's, what does that mean?
Well, a one-shot sesh is when everybody kind of gets together for like a contained adventure, and then like at the end of the night, it's like, all right, time to go home. Wow, what an adventure. Nice meeting you. Thanks for the Frito scoops, etc.
I like these two guys. I hope they have their one-shot sesh.
I'm sure that's where the whole rest of the story is going, right?
It's just the plot of the one-shot sesh.
If they ever get D&D one-shot going. So, are you scared?
From the moment John opened the door, everything was wrong. I won't say John was a clean freak, but he tried to maintain his space, and he'd always insisted we clean up for company when I was living with him. I stood there open-mouthed to see the thick layer of dust that coated nearly everything. And the longer I looked around, the worse it got. There was a half-eaten plate of food turned to mold sitting on the table. Both sinks in the kitchen were similarly moldy, and the air in the trailer stank, even beyond what I'd expect for some moldy dishes. Not what you want to see in the place that you're planning to move into.
No, but you know, I was a little distracted during this because you know, you're talking about this creepy environment. But I was just really curious to know what the half-eaten food was. You said they said half-eaten food.
Yeah.
Is it nachos? It was a rotisserie chicken or a candy apple?
For him to point out half-eaten,
yeah,
I would assume it's something that's delicious, because you'd be like, how could you only eat half of that slice of za?
Yeah.
Za being pizza.
You know, when I used to work in a movie theater, sometimes people would leave half-eaten buckets of popcorn in their seats after the movie was done, and it was my job to go in and clean them up. Sometimes I just eat them. It was free.
It's fucking gross. That's so gross, dude.
I don't care. It was pretty gross.
I lost my train of thought because I can't.
That's good.
I can't stop.
I actually had to duck into a corner of the theater where the security cameras couldn't see me because not only was it free, but I was getting paid to eat it.
Goldmine, I guess, for someone like you.
It really was.
I was extremely taken aback by the state of the trailer. But the state of my friend was even more shocking. He worked at a bank and had always kept himself clean, but now he looked like a wreck. He'd lost weight. His skin had an unhealthy, waxy look to it. His hair was overgrown and greasy, and his body odor was terrible. His smell is the first thing that made me think there was something really off about the situation. It was almost the sickly sweet smell of something dead, but not quite. I've never smelled anything exactly like it before or since. The way he's describing his friend, this sounds like somebody that's just been in quarantine for a while.
Yeah,
That sounds like all of
sounds
us.
like me currently.
Right now, my skin has an unhealthy, waxy look to it. Yeah,
Yeah.
hair overgrown.
I
This
mean,
guy. Look at this guy. He looks like
Look at
homeless
this right
Ringo
now.
Starr.
You guys want to play some D&D? Maybe a quick one-shot peace and love.
You guys down for one shot? One shot? Yeah, let's do a sesh. At this point during the encounter, I'm at a general level of unease, and I didn't have any desire to go further into the trailer. But John invites us in, and not wanting to be rude, I go in. I start to wonder if something crazy happened while I was away. John wasn't dating anyone, so this wasn't from heartbreak. We'd kept in touch after I first moved out, and even when that fell off a bit, I still heard from our mutual friends about the D&D sessions he was still attending. Regardless, despite having not heard anything about it, obviously something had happened. So, standing there in his dusty living room with Dave, who is shooting me sideways looks the entire time, I asked John if everything is alright. No response. And then, after a long silence, he assures me everything is fine. Just that. He doesn't try to explain the state of his house or anything. Weirder yet, he goes, "You guys can crash out here," and just heads off to the back of the house. I'd always known him to be a diligent host, so this was odd to say the least. Although basically, nothing was going as I expected. Now comes the part where I'm glad Dave was there. If somebody asks you, "You alright?" and they don't say anything. Alarming,
Yeah.
no?
Yeah, let me give it a whirl. Hey Ryan, your apartment's looking pretty grimy, man. You all right? Yeah, that's chilling. It's pretty chilling. Okay. Well, the bit is complete. We are done. We can resume telling the story now.
If we must.
Okay, good. Thank God. Okay.
To me, this nasty trailer was still my home. I'd lived there for more than a year before my 3-month visit to my parents, and had a sense of belonging in the place which I think made me oblivious to things that were obvious to Dave, such as a layer of undisturbed dust across the entire living room and kitchen floor, except for a thin track from the front door to the hallway leading to the back of the trailer. Whispering to me, Dave says, "Nothing in here has been used for a long time." And looking around, I realize he's right. The TV, the computer, the couch and chairs, the dining room table with its rotten food. John hadn't so much as laid a hand on any of it for a month, possibly longer.
The long track made me think Dave was gonna be like, "I think that dude's a slug." You know, like he turned into some. I guess I was imagining like a slime trail.
Yeah, like he just ekes off into the. He goes, "You guys can crash out here."
I think your friend's a slug, dude.
Dave, almost as if he's sneaking, walks quietly into the kitchen to inspect the fridge. He points out a few thick patches of dust on the flatter surfaces of the fridge, but it's harder to tell here. The fridge's metal handle has some dust, but it isn't collected. Stepping past Dave, I reach out with one finger and pop the fridge open, and was gagging before I'd even opened the door enough to trigger the interior light. Throwing my arm across my face and burying my nose in the crook of my elbow, I open the fridge about halfway. Inside, it's top to bottom rotten food. I step back after a second, turning away and trying to suppress my urge to vomit. At this point, might be time to take a U-turn and head back on home. Get back to the folks, tell them, look, I was wrong about wanting to move out. I got a pretty good gig here.
I'm just thrown by the top to bottom rotten food in the fridge. He doesn't have like a jar of olives or anything?
I hate olives, though.
Well,
Find them repulsive.
well, more for me.
Another thing, too, here, and this one is honestly maybe the most alarming to me. What is this guy living off of? Because clearly he's not eating his food.
Yeah, well, it sounds to me like that's a little jelly bean on the scale for slug theory.
More or less done playing Dust Detective, I basically shrug off everything up to this point, clear some dust from the couch, get my laptop out, and connect to the Wi-Fi. We'd always paid for the best internet available.
Whoa, good for you. Dropping a "Am I the Asshole" post on Reddit. I just got to my friend's house. It's covered in garbage, and think he's a slug now. Am I the asshole for wanting to leave?
After a while, Dave joins me and we play World of Warcraft for a bit. Eventually, he tells me he'll hang out for tonight because I'm his ride in taking him back to his place, and driving back to the trailer was a 90-minute round trip. To be clear, I would have taken him home anyway. I wouldn't blame anyone for not wanting to hang out in a room with a giant stack of moldy dishes in the sink and a fridge full of rotten food. We play games on the computer for the next few hours, and John never makes a noise. I respect the commitment to the game.
I guess.
That being said, life may not be continuing much further if you keep playing World of Warcraft when there's a slug down the hallway.
Yes, very good.
At one point, Dave asks me where the bathroom is. I tell him it's at the far end of the hallway next to John's bedroom. A low level of unease had been present since John first answered the door, and was becoming more apparent the longer we stayed. Normally, I don't walk my friends to the bathroom, but it seemed the right thing to do at the time. So, I lead Dave down the hallway, flipping on the hallway light as we go, the switch covering my fingers in dust. At this point, I was actually starting to get annoyed with all of it. I don't normally have bad seasonal allergies, but all the dust we'd been stirring up had my nose itchy and half plugged. So, on my way down the hallway, I start to consider knocking on John's bedroom door to confront him about the condition of the house. But halfway down the hallway, we see a huge hole in the floor outside the bathroom door. A jagged-edged hole through which you can clearly see the dirt, cobwebs, and shredded black plastic that used to cover insulation. Now, I'm really weirded out, but for some reason, I still point Dave into the bathroom and continue to walk to the end of the hallway where John's room is.
If this is on the trajectory that I think it is, then that's a slug hole. That is a boilerplate slug hole.
That's a slug hole if I've ever seen one.
Now that's a slug hole.
If this was you, I am concerned about you, but I also at this point am concerned you're either A slug person, or B, a zombie. So I might have to just leave and then call the cops and they could deal with it. Because I'm not gonna walk in there and now now I'm a zombie or a slug person. You eke at me or something, whatever slugs do.
But you're gonna go with zombie over slug?
I'm thinking zombie, that's what I'm thinking. I don't know.
Some sort of pod person?
I'm not staying to find out. Let's just put it that way. I can see there's no light coming from under his door. I wonder briefly if he's asleep. Annoyed, I knock. Loudly. A few seconds pass. Then, I hear a grunt from inside the room. I pop the door open and flip on the light. This is where it really starts to sink in for me how wrong this experience has felt. A cursory glance at the room confirms it's in the same state as the rest of the house. Dust everywhere, except for the track from the door to the nearest side of the bed. The bed itself was terrible. The blankets and pillows were stained a deep yellow, almost black in places. And then there was John, just laying on his back in his bed, a 1,000-yard stare through the ceiling. He didn't even react to me opening the door.
If I'm knocking on someone's door to see if they're doing well in their filthy, filthy home, if they give me in return a ooh, I don't think I'm going in there. Again, this is another juncture where I'm just thinking, well, it sounds like they're going through some stuff. I'm doing it.
Well, first off, I'm not knocking on the door like I'm the 5-0. I'm not banging on that thing annoyed.
No. You're doing like a shave and a haircut, right? Like a
shave and a haircut? That even might be a little too playful. It's going to be even more just like a, hey, man. And even if I do that and I hear,
yeah.
Okay, I'll come back later. In that moment, I forget entirely why I came to talk to John, because looking directly at him, I felt the beginnings of a profound fear, which even at the time seemed like an odd feeling to have in that situation. You see, John was not an intimidating guy, short, baby-faced, and yet, in my gut, I was afraid of him. I don't really know how to explain it. After that quick moment of fear, I quickly mumbled something about how I'd come to say goodnight, and turned off the light and shut the door. I turned around to find Dave kneeling by the hole in the floor. As I struggled to rationalize the primal fear from being in John's presence, Dave points at the edge of the hole and tells me the wood along the edge is twisted upward, as if the hole was made from below. What would do that?
A slug. Ryan, a big
No, I'm
slug.
talking like real life, like a very ambitious
Nothing?
little beaver.
I mean, I would probably say nothing, but you know, I can't imagine anything doing that. I don't know what the integrity of the trailer. You said it was a trailer. It's usually made out of like metal.
Yeah, it's like metal and
and
plastic.
wood.
Yeah. Insulation.
Right. So, you know, I guess maybe a tremor from the motion picture Tremors could do it.
A transformer could also probably do this. You
That's
know, like
true.
one of those sand snakes.
Or that drill machine that Bebop and Rocksteady use in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Once again, also could do this. There's a lot of things, but I just can't put my finger on what in the real world could make this whole. I kind of came to my senses once we were back in the living room area, and I reopened my laptop. My sudden intense fear of John eased off, and we played games for a few more hours before Dave said he wanted to rest his eyes.
What the fuck is wrong with you,
dude? What are you doing,
sorry,
bro?
But well, it seems like something subterranean poured into this home. Why don't we relocate to the safety of the living room and play Minecraft for 5 hours?
We shut everything down. I chilled out in a recliner, and Dave lay down on the couch, positioned so he could see down the hallway. I was too uneasy to sleep. After looking into John's room, I determined I wouldn't be living here after all. As much as I really didn't like living with my parents anymore, it was preferable to whatever John had going on. As the night went on, I'm just waiting for the sun to come up, really starting to wonder why we haven't left already. And then suddenly, Dave's eyes get wide, and he motions with his hand to get my attention. He points towards the hallway, and I turn my head slowly in the recliner to look. After perhaps 15 or so seconds of staring hard into the darkened hallway, I hear a slight creak from the darkness. A little while passes. Both of our eyes remain glued to the dark hallway. We hear a few more creaks. And then, out of the darkness, John's shadowy silhouette slowly emerges. And now, he's just standing at the edge of the hallway, staring into the dark. That deep sense of primal fear builds in me again. The only thing I could compare it to is once when out hiking alone, I ran right into a bear going the opposite way on the trail. I feel like making this clear is paramount. Seeing John lurking in the darkness of that hallway inspired in me a state of fear so powerful I feel I have no choice but to look for unconventional answers as to what happened to my friend. Because the only thing comparable to that gut feeling of dread that my short, baby-faced friend created in me was the time I ran into one of the largest terrestrial predators on the planet. What's the right play in this situation, if you're the narrator? Because
I'd be like, all right, good hang.
I'm not saying shit. I'm just.
Thanks for the Tostitos.
My thought is if I become furniture, he won't see me. He will just. If I become so still, perhaps he won't even see that I'm there.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, this guy doesn't seem like he's moving around too much. So I'd probably just go.
You ever try to get out of a recliner quickly? It's tough because your feet are up, and when you have to do that, the momentum carries you forward. By the time you're already on the ground, he's already sliming you. There was something wrong and dangerous going on that I can't justify analytically. But my instincts told me I was in danger in a way I'd never been prepared for. We lay there in silence while he silently stood in the hallway for hours, hoping that our own silence would keep him from approaching further. Eventually, he crept back down the hallway to his bedroom. Seeing an opportunity, we quietly and quickly got our shit together, sneaked out to my car, and left.
Great. Good job, my dudes.
At that point, I'm feeling like I can't believe that worked.
Yeah, but I mean, it doesn't seem like he's eaten a long time, so he probably doesn't have a lot of fuel in the tank. I don't think he's like chasing after anybody.
But if someone's possessed, though, you don't know this, you don't believe this, but if someone's possessed, they could have the strength of. That's 10 times their capability. Like Annalise Michelle squeezing that apple with one hand.
Yeah, but I don't think this guy is squeezing any apples. It sounds like he's mostly concerned with pooping the bed over and over.
After the event, I did a little bit of digging, talked to mutual friends, and drove out to John's parents' place to talk to them. But hit dead ends everywhere. Apparently, he left town. I even spoke to a friend of mine who's an officer about a welfare check. but as I didn't know where he went, they couldn't really do much. His parents left town too, and no one that I know has seen or heard from John since. I've mostly tried to forget it all happened. Of course, there are possible explanations to his strange behavior. Perhaps a psychotic break, or maybe drugs. It occurred to me more recently that I should have considered the fact that he might have been seriously ill. But I honestly believe none of these are the answer. I realized nothing overtly paranormal took place, but my gut tells me that something well out of the ordinary was taking place. He had an inhuman presence, akin to a predator. I've wondered about possessions or doppelgangers and all kinds of things. Something tells me I wasn't dealing with the guy I had lived with at that point. It felt like a different being altogether. I'm torn between wishing I'd investigated more thoroughly at the time and being glad I stayed clear of whatever was going on after my brief brush with it. I don't know what he was after. I don't even know if he knew we saw him in the dark. But I think our being awake prevented something truly awful from happening. And yet, it's a big question mark, really. If you don't believe me, I don't blame you. So, are you scared? Let's see if this is a real story. Something Got My Friend was posted by an anonymous user to the Truth Is Here subreddit, and it is a true story.
No, I don't believe it. No.
Wait a second.
Here's the thing. No.
I don't know, man. I mean, look, if it was a fake story, you would think there'd be a bigger bang at the end.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a fun yarn, but, you know that thing where you watch like a horror movie and you're frustrated because the people are just making the wrong decisions?
Yes.
This was that, but like the entire story.
It seems like on this Reddit there's a lot of comments of people who obviously believe this is a true story, and there's part of me that believes that too. That this could have been like this guy got out of control with drugs, or it was a mental health thing. But once again, I just keep going back to that hole and the lack of nutrition.
I mean, it could have been Grubhub and some Happy Meals or something.
Yeah, sure. It's possible. Either way, I'm creeped out. That was unsettling. Yeah. I'm looking forward to drinking water from my fresh, clean Brita in my fridge. Not sponsored by Brita. Good night.
Don't let the slug man bite.
Now I remember why I stopped playing this.
Open your world to all that SeaWorld has to discover. Enjoy
the test and did not sleep for 30 days. Their conversations and activities were monitored, and it was noted that they continued to talk about increasingly traumatic incidents in their past, and the general tone of their conversations took a darker aspect after the 4-day mark.
That would have been me 3 hours into this experiment. I would have immediately been talking about how, life is meaningless. I would have immediately gone into nihilism without a cat nap. You find me without a cat nap, I will be just talking about all the dark things in my life. That's definitely... But yeah, how cruel is this? I mean, this is some next level torture. They're saying that it's an experiment, but this feels like torture. Yeah. You're going to stay up for as long as you can. When's the first time you ever saw someone die in person? It's like, good God, dude. Just let me can I just sit here? Like, my God.
And that's 4 days in. That's 4 days in. Think
4
about
days.
how bad it gets, yeah.
4 days. Which, they said it's a 15-day trial, right?
30 days.
30-day trial. Full month.
Yeah.
Okay. 4 days in, and this is already happening. No, thank you.
So then it continues from that. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I was going to say, and then it continues to... After 5 days, they started to complain about the circumstances and events that led them to where they were and started to demonstrate severe paranoia. they stopped talking to each other and began alternately whispering to the microphones and one-way mirrored portholes. Oddly, they all seemed to think that they could win the trust of the experimenters by turning over their comrades, the other subjects in captivity with them. At first, the researchers suspected this was an effect of the gas itself. Which I don't know about that.
I don't know about that.
I probably just want to get out of there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Come on.
That's fascinating, though, that that they were previously like, oh, it's us versus them, and now they're beginning to dissent after just the 5-day mark. I'll continue off of that in the next paragraph. It says, after 9 days, the first of them started screaming. He ran the length of the chamber repeatedly, yelling at the top of his lungs for 3 hours straight. He continued attempting to scream, but was only able to produce occasional squeaks. The researchers postulated that he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most surprising thing about this behavior is how the other captives reacted to it, or rather, didn't react to it. They continued whispering to the microphones until the second of the captives started to scream. The two non-screaming captives took the books apart, smeared page after page with their own feces, and pasted them calmly over the glass portholes. The screaming promptly stopped. So did the whispering to the microphones. Okay, you know what? We are so back. I forgot about that detail. That's dope.
I love that.
That's so cool. Okay, so like they're beginning to lose their mind, and a couple of them are snapping. And those that haven't snapped, it's like sure they're using crude implements, books and feces to cover up the portholes, but there's a deliberation to what they're doing. There's some greater plan, and it makes it seem like they're all in on it in some like ethereal sense. Because as soon as the researchers can't see what's going on in there anymore, the screaming stops, the whispering stops, and it's like what's got a hold of these people. It's so good. I like it.
Well, I think there's also from another angle too, the juxtaposition of a man, like the uncomfortable and like haunting nature of a guy screaming until his vocal cords get completely snapped and fried, and he's still doing it is painful. But then you also have the other people who are sitting there whispering. So it's like you have this juxtaposition between people who are this guy who's screaming, and then people who are whispering. And like you said, sure, it's a little like over heightened with them tearing the pages off and rubbing their asses with it and putting it up. But I think it does a good job it has a purpose of them then putting it up on the window, and then now all is quiet. Like it's just a very, very simple setup, very simple scene, but honestly, it's very nice.
They all share a consciousness now, which kind of gets touched on later in the story, I remember. But it's like they all are in a unison about what they're doing, so they're taking deliberate moves to enact whatever this plan is, being quiet, covering up the windows, etc.
It's also very animalistic, like the idea that like it's almost as if they're trying to bait a response, like it feels like a dying animal, like screaming and all this kind of things. And then once they like kind of complete their ritual, or they're like them sealing up so that people can't look in, then they are being more truthful, or by truthful I guess I mean they go quiet, like they're achieving something. So it's just like it seems like it's mass hysteria, it seems like it's these people are going insane, but there's still a level of calculated chaos that's happening that's very intriguing. But to continue on,
get up to 6 accounts per household and unlimited DVR space included with YouTube TV. Try it free. Terms apply. Cancel anytime.
That's not going anywhere. That's not a forecast by a wishy-washy weatherman. It's a statement of fact made by those who refuse to load trailers or live life by, I think it's good enough, standard.
After 3 more days passed, the researchers checked the microphones hourly to make sure they were working, since they thought it impossible that no sound could be coming with 5 people inside. The oxygen consumption in the chamber indicated that all 5 must still be alive. In fact, it was the amount of oxygen 5 people would consume at a very heavy level of strenuous exercise. On the morning of the 14th day, the researchers did something they said they would not do to get a reaction from the captives. They used the intercom inside the chamber, hoping to provoke any response from the captives they were afraid were either dead or vegetables. They announced, We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor, or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you your immediate freedom. To their surprise, they heard a single phrase and a calm voice responds, "We no longer want to be freed." Which I remember that. That's coming back to me now.
Yeah. That's still good. That still works. I remember that being good, and it's still good. I like that. So, these researchers, they have, because otherwise the experiments to see what happens on their own without outside intervention after being awake for 30 days, and now, because the whole time these people are in there whispering to the portholes and talking, they're not getting any response. There's no human input. So now they're giving human input to try to figure out what's going on inside there, and they respond, "We no longer want to be free." Terrifying. So, they've become something else. They've become something that's no longer interested in getting out. They're no longer political prisoners or members of an army or a war. There's something beyond. This still works. It's still cool. It may get lame in a bit. As a matter of fact, it probably will. But right now, I'm still into it. This is great.
I am too. But we're branching into even the "we no longer want to be freed" line. While creepy, like I said, we're getting into monster energy can levels of territory here. We no longer want to be free. It's creepy, and I like the setup, but it's cheesy. But I like that. I don't think it needs to be anything too crazy and serious. So I enjoy that. Now, tell me if I'm wrong here. So, are they? It's continuous gas being pumped into the room, correct? They're never.
They said it's being monitored so that it doesn't become toxic, but yes, there is gas in the room.
So it is, okay.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Sure.
Okay, so that I like that. I like that aspect. I'm glad that's what's happening. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So from there, it says, after they hear the line, "We no longer want to be freed," debate broke out among the researchers and the military forces funding the research. Unable to provoke any more response using the intercom, it was finally decided to open the chamber at midnight on the 15th day. The chamber was flushed of the stimulant gas and filled with fresh air, and immediately, voices from the microphones began to object. 3 different voices began begging, as if pleading for the life of loved ones, to turn the gas back on. The chamber was opened and soldiers sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever, and so did the soldiers when they saw what was inside. 4 of the 5 subjects were still alive, although no one could rightly call the state that any of them it's a typo, sorry. No one could rightly call the state that any of them were in life. The food rations past day 5 had not been so much as touched. There were chunks of meat from the dead test subjects' thighs and chest stuffed into the drain in the center of the chamber, blocking the drain and allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate on the floor. Precisely how much of the water on the floor was actually blood was never determined. All 4 surviving test subjects also had a large portion of muscle and skin torn away from their bodies. The destruction of flesh and exposed bone on their fingertips indicated that the wounds were inflicted by hand, not with teeth as the researchers initially thought. Closer examination of the position and angles of the wounds indicated that most, if not all of them, were self-inflicted. So already, before we get into the more intense details, these people have plugged up the drains to not allow anything to leave the room, more than likely to keep the gas in as high concentrations in the room as possible, and they're ripping out pieces of their own skin. They've already killed one guy and used his skin to clog up the drains. They've become like these starved animals just tearing apart flesh.
Yeah. I mean, they clog the drain too with muscle and skin and stuff like that as well.
Yeah.
There's a thin layer of liquid on the floor that you can't tell how much of it's water, how much of it is blood, which also leads you to believe too, how much of it's piss, how much of it is bodily fluids that they've just been putting on the floor. It's getting extremely animalistic. I mean, even some of the descriptions here, it sounds like an ape attack or like a chimpanzee attack or something like that. They're they're de-evolving mentally, and they're now screaming and pleading to not let the nice air in, which I mean, at this point it's got to be reminiscent of some kind of smoking bar or something like that in New York. It's got to be some place where the hipsters go to smoke their European cigarettes. And whenever someone lets the door open, they say close it.
That's what comes to your mind when you hear this. When you hear skin and flesh and bodily fluids all over the room, you're like, Europeans, am I right?
Yeah. No, not Europeans. I think of 5'4" hipsters in Hoboken, New York, sitting there, and they're open, or New Jersey, where the fuck Hoboken is, and they're sitting there and they're just like, they shut the door, you're letting all the good smoke out. Is what they say. Because I've been to some of those places, let me tell you, and it's hell. It's its own little gas chamber, let me tell you, and it is not a fun place to be. There's always one pool table, and there's always two people that don't know how to play pool on the pool. It doesn't matter.
You're right. That's just as bad. Just as bad as what we're talking about.
I hate to say it. I don't want to be this kind of guy, but I do feel like it is just as bad. That's just me, though. All right? People might have their own experiences. All right. But to get a little more description of the gore, the gruesome nature that's happening, I'll continue reading. The abdominal organs below the ribcage of all 4 test subjects had been removed, while the heart, lungs, and diaphragm remained in place. The skin and most of the muscles attached to the ribs had been ripped off, exposing the lungs through the ribcage. All the blood vessels and organs remained intact. They had just been taken out and laid on the floor. Fanning out around the eviscerated, great word, fanning out around the eviscerated but still living bodies of the subjects, the digestive tract of all 4 could be seen to be working, digesting food. It quickly became apparent that what they were digesting was their own flesh that they had ripped off and eaten over the course of days.
Okay, so for one, this paragraph's very brutal, very graphic. It technically is not 100% out of realm of reality, because there are cases, with surgeries, they'll take your organs out and lay them on the table.
Sure.
Right? Still attached to you, still working as they operate on other things. So technically it could exist. However, this is the paragraph that brings the story into more fantastical, which, to be clear, is fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
If you want to tell a supernatural story, or out there story, which is where this goes, that's cool. But for me, this is the paragraph where it leaves alternate history into the unfiction zombie world, basically. Yeah. Which again, totally fine. You can still do cool stories with it. But I think this was the paragraph that, and from here on out, that as a kid, I went from is this real to oh no, it's just in a setting that could be real. Which is fine. It's cool. It is what it is.
Well, for a lot of people too, I think what you're describing is once you leave that realm of reality, it's very hard for people to stay invested as something that you're oh my god, what is this? You know?
Yeah.
Something that remains more horrifying. Which, to be fair, like you're saying, it's still fun. It's still fine. But I do agree. I think that this is a part where we're leaving the reality train, and now it's now we're just having fun versus actually being super scary.
Which for me, I love obviously supernatural stories, weird stuff. It's most of what I read, what I intake, fiction and horror, right? So I'm still on board, but I understand this could be a point where a lot of people who were otherwise on board are okay, and they dip out.
Yeah, it's entering schlock. I mean, with how grotesque and how descriptive it is, it's getting into the fantastical, and it's getting into, kind of just some cheese. It's like a B horror film now, the digestive tract of all 4 could be seen working, digesting food, and not only is it food, but it's their own skin. It's awesome, but that's brutal and fun in all the right ways. But it is, it's a step of it's a step between a man in a business suit and a chocolate factory owner.
Yeah.
You have a guy in a purple suit, and you're oh, does he work, at Chase Bank? And then now he has a top hat, and now he owns a chocolate factory. That's the step that we just took, all right?
I see what's happening. It's a different world we're dealing in. Yeah.
Yes.
But that being said, very cool. The idea that they laid out their organs and were eating themselves, that's awesome. That's dope.
It's the best part of every zombie film. You know, I mean, like it feels like something that would be in like 28 Days Later or something.
Yeah.
These are the parts of the zombie films where exactly it's the fun body horror aspect of a zombie film that you're waiting for. So, I enjoy it, but once again, we didn't get prepped for that thing, so we're stepping into kind of goofy town.
You just gotta know what you're getting into, but it's still fun.
Sure.
And with that, it keeps getting fun because I'm going to continue reading. It says, most of the soldiers were Russian special operatives at that facility, but still many refused to return to the chamber to remove the test subjects. They continued to scream to be left in the chamber and alternatively begged and demanded that the gas be turned back on, lest they fall asleep. To everyone's surprise, the test subjects put up a fierce fight in the process of being removed from the chamber. One of the Russian soldiers died from having his throat ripped out. Another was gravely injured by having his testicles ripped out and an artery in his leg severed by one of the subject's teeth. Another 5 of the soldiers lost their lives if you count ones that committed in the weeks following the incident. Or sorry, if you follow the ones that committed unalive, YouTube, in the weeks following the incident.
Yeah, get fucked. The one thing that I like about this compared to something like Jeff the Killer is that it really holds no bar, but also it like makes you think about the actual anatomy of it. If you look at something like Jeff the Killer, which is definitely written by I'm not like a 10-year-old,
right?
12.
Well, okay, whatever. 13. 10's a bit harsh.
I'm being rude.
You are,
sure. But what I mean is that it's juvenile, where it's just like he cut him, whatever, and that's supposed to be the big thing. Like, he bled tons, you know.
Yeah.
Instead here, it's having his testicle ripped off and an artery in his leg severed by one of the subject's teeth. Which, when I hear that, it makes me think of like the brake line to a bicycle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like those thick like cords, whatever, getting ripped. It's nice imagery, which you know.
You can almost picture like the teeth tearing away and like the artery running down the thigh, pulling out.
Absolutely.
It's great. It's great. This is like this feeling. That's like, that's awful. That's body horror. That's what you're supposed to feel. That's the direction. So it's successfully getting across what the story is trying to get across.
It's that level of intrigue where you get into you get into the area where you're like, I don't know why I'm intrigued, but I'm like horrifyingly disgusted. That's that it's that element of body horror that I think taps into, that really disgusting part of our brain where you're like it's almost like watching a live leak video or something. It's horrible, but what are you gonna do? Look away? Very press play on the video, So keep going on. In the struggle, one of their 4 living subjects had his spleen ruptured. He bled out almost immediately. The medical researchers attempted to sedate him, but this proved impossible. He was injected with more than 10 times the human dose of a morphine derivative and still fought like a cornered animal, breaking the ribs and arm of one doctor. When heart was seen to beat for a full 2 minutes after he had bled out to the point there was more air in his vascular system than blood. Even after it stopped, he continued to scream and flail for another 3 minutes, struggling to attack anyone in reach and just repeating the word "more" over and over, weaker and weaker, until he finally fell silent. Like I said, let me tell you, my little Monster Energy drink there, that's fine. But I do think that this also is beginning to feel like somebody definitely went to Barnes & Noble and just bought a Grey's Anatomy book, is what it's feeling like. There's so much.
You're being a bit. I think I'm still into it. I think you're being a bit mean.
No. I'm saying that I'm just saying I like it too. Listen, when I say these things, it isn't a direct me being like this is bad. I'm just saying that like with how medical it's getting so quickly, it definitely feels like someone was just like, okay, well, what's this? And then they just kind of were going into that. And there was no prep time also for this, right? I think that I'll get into more of this later, but it just feels like right now we're getting so, like, we're talking about so many of the specific organs, which sure, I mean, all he did was say spleen, but it's like, it's so much extremely specific details to specific organs.
I don't know, I kind of like the idea that, like, his heart's still beating, and there's no blood, and there's air flying through his system, but it's like, It's like his body. You know how like when something dies and you electrocute it, the muscles still spasm, like they still react. It's like that. It's like some greater force is forcing his body to work, even though it can't anymore. And he's like a cadaver being thrown around by some imaginary thing. I think it works. Again, in the realm of the fantastical that we've established. I think it's creepy.
I fully believe it works. Right. Yeah. I mean, I'll go into more of what I think of like the official criticisms that I have for this later on, but I think it definitely works. I'm just saying that in my mind, I could see a person sitting here writing this with a nice glass of red wine, and they bust open one of those like heavily illustrated Barnes & Noble collectible books, hardback books of Grey's Anatomy. I think the guy was just looking at tons of source material for old-timey doctors and stuff and all kinds of things that, how do things connect with each other. But I appreciate that. I appreciate the level of detail. And
well, I think you're a hater. I think this is
okay. All right, man. All right, man. It's not true.
I think this is fraudulent. I think this is cheap shot at quality storytelling. I for one won't stand for it. Me and the Russian sleep experiment truthers don't abide by this.
Listen, I like it. Is what I'm saying. I think it doesn't matter. All I'm going to say is the only real criticism here, because whatever you can say about the Grey's Anatomy book, sure. But why I guess the big thing here is repeating the word more over and over, weaker and weaker, until I finally went silent. That's right up my alley. I like that. Okay. It's getting kind of it's into the cheesy realm of like this is the part in the movie too where he says that and his eyes are all jaundiced up and he's looking around until they roll into the back of his head. He's like, more, whatever. And then all the doctors look at each other and they're like, gulp, right? They probably don't say the word gulp, but they do gulp. And it's a nice beat. It's a nice beat. Gulp?
I'm gonna keep reading before you keep slandering, digging this hole for yourself.
Okay, all right.
Okay. The surviving 3 test subjects were heavily restrained and moved to a medical facility. The 2 with intact vocal cords continuously begging for the gas, demanding to be kept awake. The most injured of the 3 was taken to the only surgical operating room that the facility had. In the process of preparing the subject to have his organs placed back within his body, it was found that he was effectively immune to the sedative they had given him to prepare him for the surgery. He fought furiously against his restraints when the anesthetic gas was brought out to put him under. He managed to tear most of the way through a 4-inch wide leather strap on one wrist, even though the weight of a 200-pound soldier was holding that wrist as well. It took only a little more anesthetic than normal to put him under. And the instant his eyelids fluttered and closed, his heart stopped.
Queen Victoria the
In the autopsy of the test subject that died on the operating table, it was found that his blood had tripled the normal level of oxygen. His muscles that were still attached to his skeleton were badly torn, and he had broken 9 bones in his struggle to not be subdued. Most of them were from the force of his own muscles, had exerted on him. All right, I'm so back. That goes so hard. They had so much oxygen in their system that their bodies were like bulking up, that their muscles were becoming super strong. Just with a wrist, he's able to like punch through the strap and the soldier holding it down. His bones are shattering from the mass of his own muscles. All this oxygenation, and then the moment he goes to sleep, he's dead. I love it. That's cool. That's cool.
No, it's definitely levels of anime that's being.
Oh my gosh, that's it. We're gonna fight right now.
No, it's good. I think it's fun. I don't know how tough it is.
It is
the
on the
idea
top.
too.
I'll give you that.
The idea too is like with some of these things. The only complaint that I have with any of these, which one, even if listen, even if you were like, this is amazing, I think this is like brilliant, and if I'm like, this is like great B-level schlocky fun, it's a fun hell ride. The only complaint I have so far is I wish that we got to like, maybe we got to experience more of these scenes, like more, like I just wish there was more to it, because right now it's like it's paraphrasing heavily.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
it's telling these like huge actions that are happening very quickly, which is great for a short story. I think that like the pacing is great, but if anything, I'm just invested, and I wish that like we could get more things of like learning more about like even if we don't know about the prisoners, we know more about the people that are subduing them. To where whenever you hear something like, you know, let's see, he managed to tear most of the way through a 4-inch wide leather strap, even though the weight of a 200-pound soldier was holding the wrist as well. It might not be important who that soldier is, but would it make it more emotionally impactful? Would it make it more intense if you knew who that soldier was? If you knew the name of that guy, what was going on, how he's been acting through this whole thing so far? It's just I want more of that. I think it's all great. It's paraphrasing, but I think it's working great. But to me, I'm like, oh, like that's where my mind goes when I hear all this. Is I'm like trying to picture the 200-pound soldier, like who he is, how long he's been working there, just like little shit like that, to where we're like dead sprinting through these people and like their crazy manic episodes, but really I have no idea who any of the scientists are, or these like people that are being involved in these experiments and stuff. To where I just wish there was a little more character building there. Is that a huge negative? Not at all, but that's just where my mind is at right now.
I'll give you that. I'll give you that. The story to me, it breaks it at some parts, especially later when there's so many quotes and stuff like that.
Sure.
But for at least the first half, it feels to me like it's almost a field report. Like it's what they are writing back. Mm-hmm. Like, subject was held down to chamber, cut through straps, immediately died. Autopsy revealed his bones were like it's a government report almost of what happened.
Yeah, definitely.
It breaks that later in the story, but for the first part, that's kind of the thought it brings to mind.
Yeah, well, see, I love that. I love stories like that. You get a lot of that stuff with like sailors, or like a lot of like H.P. Lovecraft stuff. Where it's sailors talking about things that are happening on specific days of their vessel or whatever. Yeah. I love that. I love that stuff. It makes it feel much more formal, and also how informal it gets also shows like how crazy things have gotten. It's just a really fun narrative device to use. But we could talk about more of this. I don't want to keep slowing down the story or anything. But so the next part reads: the second survivor had been the first of the group of 5 to start screaming. His vocal cords destroyed, he was unable to beg or object to surgery, and he only reacted by shaking his head violently in disapproval when the anesthetic gas brought near him. He shook his head yes when someone suggested reluctantly they try the surgery without anesthetic, and did not react to the entire 6-hour procedure of replacing his abdominal organs and attempting to cover them with what remained of his skin. The surgeon presiding stated repeatedly that it should be medically possible for the patient to still be alive. One terrified nurse assisting the surgery stated that she had holy fuck, dude, I can't read. One terrified nurse assisting the surgery stated that she had seen the patient's mouth curl into a smile several times whenever his eyes met hers. This is all stuff that would be great for a movie. Like I'd love to see a mini-series on this. You know what I mean? Little acting moments. Because while I'm gonna keep the idea. Sorry to interrupt you. I'm gonna keep the sentiment that this is entering B-level schlocky territory. It would be with good practical effects. This would be a really, really fun scene to see of just like this guy not talking violently, like just because I also imagine his eyes are wide open and he's just like looking around and stuff. Yes, we do get into some Jeff the Killer vibes when his mouth curls into a smile several times. I could go without the Heath Ledger Joker aspect there, but I do still think it's really fun and creepy.
So this story's been adapted. I don't think I've seen any of them, but this story's been adapted into some short films.
Has it?
Yeah, there was in 2018. There was a thriller directed by John Farley, who made a film called The Sleep Experiment. That was about it. There is a novel adaptation that was based on it, and there's several other adaptations in the works. Yeah, and there's like a 2015 short film, I think, based on it. Yeah, it's been adapted several times. I don't know how good they are. I haven't seen any of them, but a lot of people share the same sentiment that this would translate well visually.
Yeah, well, it's so packed full.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes into with I don't think H.P. Lovecraft ever went as grotesque or brutal, but just with how descriptive, he was.
Yeah, H.P. Lovecraft's the king of being like, the monster was indescribable. It had 4 eyes and just describes it for the next.
Yeah. Describes it in all of its glory. Like, basically, yeah, it takes 7 pages to just be like, man, he was tall.
It was weird, yeah. It was real strange, yeah. This was crazy. Yeah.
But with how descriptive they're being with, I mean, even some of these things, which also, if I had to be a bit of a, does it make sense that if they were prisoners of war that they would be doing surgeries to sew back in their, like, at this point, do you feel, just out of reading this so far, do you think that they would even perform the surgeries, or do you think something more realistic would be that they would just shoot them and get new testaments?
I mean, they probably, so it depends on how much money's invested into this project, and I also think that they're curious why this happened, right? Like, not to get really dark, right, but to also get really dark. There's cases during, like, the Holocaust of, like Nazi doctors, when they were, like, doing human experimentation on, people in concentration camps, that they would, like, keep them alive to undergo the experiment, right? Because they want to know what the effects are, what happens to you in the long run. So yeah, because they can get their money's worth and their research out of it, they might. If I recall right, the story actually ends with someone doing what you're suggesting. But if this happened in a lab setting, you'd probably want to know why it happened.
Yeah, definitely. I guess, yeah. I mean, that makes, like, whenever you say that, I think it makes sense. I guess when I hear that, like, they are replacing his abdominal organs and attempting to cover them with the remained skin, to me, I'm like, would they go through that effort for these prisoners, or would they just be like, I'm going to get more prisoners to try the gas again?
Does it say replacing, or does it say placing? Because his stuff, procedure of... maybe it does say replacing. Maybe it means just placing them back in his torso. Because remember, they have them torn out and laid around them. So it's just taking the ones he has and putting them back into place.
Yeah.
I don't think they do an organ transplant. Yeah, sure.
No, I didn't think so either, but I'm even thinking, like, if your gutty works are just hanging out, I don't think you can just put your guts back in. And they're just, it's fine. I mean,
it depends on damage, because, like, in surgery, right, they'll do that. They'll take your chest and track out and set it around.
Surgeons that are doing it not feral.
Right, as we've established, we're in the realm of...
devil's advocate. I'm just, okay. Just a general thought, but yeah.
Okay, I'll continue off of that. So it says, when the surgery ended, the subject looked at the surgeon and began to wheeze loudly, attempting to talk while struggling. Assuming this must be something of drastic importance, the surgeon had a pen and pad fetched so the patient could write his message. It was simple. Keep cutting. The other 2 test subjects were given the same surgery, both without anesthetic as well, although they had to be injected with a paralytic for the duration of the operation. The surgeon found it impossible to perform the operation while the patients laughed continuously. Once paralyzed, the subjects could only follow the attending researchers with their eyes. The paralytic cleared their system in an abnormally short period of time, and they were soon trying to escape their bonds. The moment they could speak, they were again asking for the stimulus gas. The researchers tried asking why they had injured themselves, why they had ripped out their own guts, and why they wanted to give the gas again. Only one response was given: I must remain awake. Yeah, I'm still awake. How about you?
I'm thinking out loud. I'm just thinking.
The hater.
I'm processing.
No.
First off, I haven't hated any of this. I've been in full support. I've been in full support this whole time. All right. I'm just saying that I'm very curious to know what the gas is. More specifics on that. I wish I would know. There's such an emphasis on staying awake and wanting the gas, and the fact that it's vague makes it very interesting. Like, I'm really pondering what it is exactly, and the obsessive idea of staying awake, or like needing this thing that has basically taken over their psyche. It's just becoming very. I love in this that they really don't relent on the obsessive nature. Like, it's almost. I mean, it's pretty instantaneous that the guy grips it like that, right? So it makes me wonder what exactly the gas was being used for, which these are all things, too, that obviously, when someone writes something like this, if they told you immediately what it was, it wouldn't have the same kind of weight because you could probably find a justification to why people wouldn't act this way. But it is interesting. Like, if there was a really fun way of, like, what kind of gas, what kind of purpose would the gas be used for to keep someone awake? Which, you know, the idea of, like, oh, this causes people, like, even just something stupid where, like, there's sometimes, like, there's been stuff in, like, sci-fi or even, like, weird horror films where people are trying to experiment with drugs that, like, or even, like, Limitless. You know that movie Limitless with Bradley Cooper? The idea of, like, activating certain parts of your brain that you say they don't use, which I don't know how true that is, but even the idea of, like, trying to solve the idea, like, I actually think this is an American Dad episode. There was a pill you could take that you wouldn't have to sleep. Your body would just naturally get its rest, so you never had to sleep. It's just, like, an interesting concept, especially for a horror film. That I'm like, in my mind, that's where it's going. It's like this gas is supposed to be a stimulant to where your body is continuously going through like REM sleep cycle and like being rested, but you're consciously awake to where like I don't know. Like I'm having a lot of fun hypothesizing that in my head and trying to find some kind of fun answer to that because to me it makes all of these lines that are so like it's almost like epically Shakespearean or theatrical of like I must remain awake. It gives them a lot more weight, I think, and doesn't make them feel like by putting myself in the situation of trying to find like an answer to this. It gives these little one-offs and quotes a lot more weight, which I enjoy.
Yeah, I think I'm going to save my theories about what it is to the end.
Sure, yeah.
But I do have a theory for what I think the gas is and like what happens here.
I'm curious. I'm curious to hear it. So
and we're near the end too, so we'll get there.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're almost there, so we can. I'll wait to talk. I've been writing some stuff down as we've been reading through this, but all three subjects' restraints were reinforced, and they were placed back into the chamber, awaiting determination as to what should be done with them. The researchers, facing the wrath of their military's benefactors for having failed to stated goals of their project, considered euthanizing the surviving subjects. The commanding officer, a former KGB agent, instead saw potential, and he wanted to see what would happen if they were to put back on the gas. The researchers strongly objected, but were overruled.
Interesting.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, you're good. That's just a fascinating paragraph because that's kind of what we talked about. Like, why would they keep them alive? What would be needed? Like, what would they just kill them? Would they start over? And now it's like the KGB, like, which again is like the boogeyman of the story. Is like, what if we put them back on the gas? What happens then? Which is something. I mean, if you're experimenting with people who are effectively disposable to you, then yeah, you're going to do weird stuff like that to see what happens. Especially since the first results were so strange.
Yeah. I think this introduction of the commanding officer also introduces, which I kind of wish he was in the story a little earlier. Having such a commanding officer that is doing, who is kind of the advocate for being like, oh no, fuck it, we're already here, let's keep going.
Yeah.
It's super interesting, and also it humanizes the other researchers who are just like we fucked up. We should not be doing this.
These two
and then having an opposition to that is really interesting. But in preparation for being sealed in the chamber again, the subjects were connected to an EEG monitor and had their restraints padded for long-term confinement. To everyone's surprise, all three stopped struggling the moment it was let slip that they were going back in the gas. It was obvious that at this point, all three were putting up a great struggle to stay awake. One of the subjects that could speak was humming loudly and continuously. The mute subject was straining his legs against the leather bonds with all of his might. Then right, then left again for something to focus on. The remaining subject was holding his head off of his pillow and blinking rapidly. Having been the first to be wired for EEG, most of the researchers were monitoring his brainwaves in surprise. They were normal most of the time, but sometimes flatlined inexplicably. It looked as if he were repeatedly suffering from brain death before returning to normal. As they focused on paper scrolling out of the brainwave monitor, only one nurse saw his eyes slip shut at the same moment his head hit the pillow. His brainwaves immediately changed to that of deep sleep, then flattened for the last time as his heart simultaneously stopped.
like he's suffering brain death over and over to stay awake, and then for the split second he falls asleep, he's out for good, dead.
No, yeah, especially just we keep getting introduced to all these new things now that there's a nurse that's dealing with them and stuff. Because before, when I first started reading this, I just assumed that it was like, okay, they're like in the mountains somewhere, like some weird Russian mountain lab that you see in a movie, and it's just these like scientists who are hooking them up. But no, they have like a full operation team. I mean, they have the officers there, they have nurses, and now they have scientists and commanding officers. It just keeps adding in these characters that are just little interesting things that, you know, I'm curious. Like I wish that there was just more to it. But yeah, we're so close to the end.
We're so close. Yeah, I'll do this one. All right. So the only remaining subject that could speak started screaming to be sealed in now. His brainwaves showed the same flat lines as one who had just died from falling asleep. The commander gave the order to seal the chamber with both subjects inside, as well as 3 researchers. One of the named 3 immediately drew his gun and shot the commander point blank between the eyes, then turned the gun on the mute subject and blew his brains out as well. He pointed the gun to the remaining subject, still restrained to a bed, as the remaining members of the medical and research team fled the room. "I won't be locked in here with these things, not with you," he screamed at the man strapped to the table. "What are you?" he demanded. "I must know." And if you would like to finish us out.
The subject smiled.
"Have you forgotten so easily?"
the subject asked.
"We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go into nocturnal haven where we cannot tread."
The researcher paused, then aimed at the subject's heart and fired. The EEG flatlined as the subject weakly choked out,
"So nearly free."
And that's the end.
That's the end of the story. I just want to say real quick before we get into the analysis, the little childhood me is squealing in excitement that he got to be the first to hear Meat Canyon do the narration of the final lines of the Russian sleep experiment. That feels like a storybook moment for me. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, of course. It's very like, I guess, where do we want to start? Do we want to start with criticisms? Like, I have a lot I want to say.
Let me say real quick what my theory is regarding the gas and like what.
Yes, actually, please. I'm curious what you have to say about
that part at the end where it says that the one subject is experiencing brain death over and over every time he starts to go to sleep, and when he finally does go to sleep, he flatlines. And then we have the ending, of course, that monologue where the subject says, "We are you, we are the madness that lurks in your mind," blah, blah, blah. Which, as you said, monster energy can moment. I get that. But also, I excuse it a little bit because what I think is happening in this story, I also want to clarify this could not be the original intent of the author, but I have a habit, especially when I was a kid, of making stories better in my head. Like for example, you remember in the original Terminator movie how everyone dunked on it because when Arnold's face gets ripped off, it just goes to like a plastic silicone mask?
Yeah.
So I thought that was the scariest thing ever as a kid, because to me what happened there is when half of his face got ripped off, the machine was no longer dedicating resources to looking like a human. It had given up on the farce. So the reason his face looked fake is because the machine didn't care to look real anymore. So like, I always do stuff like that, but as a kid at least, I'm like, oh, I see the best in the story. So what I saw as a kid in Russian Sleep Experiment, which again may not be the point, is there's these theories in like spiritualism and stuff like that, that humanity is kind of the manifestation, or at least human souls are the manifestation of something in a plane we can't interact with, something in the realm of the spiritual. And that at any point we can fall prey to things that exist in the realm of the spiritual, albeit, angels, demons, ghosts, whatever your belief system is. So my idea with this story, especially from that in monologue, is that every day people are constantly under prey from these effectively demons, these monsters of the unseen realm. And when we sleep, our body effectively builds up the immunity to fight them off. But because these subjects are kept awake for so long, they no longer have that immunity and effectively become possessed by whatever these creatures are. So the stimulant wasn't what was causing this stuff to go wrong. The stimulant was just working as a drug that kept them awake. And in staying awake, it let their bodies become the vessel for these spirits to come into. So these spirits possess them. I think the point that at which it happens is when they started screaming. When they start screaming, freaking out, that's the person in there about to die, realizing that they're about to die, that something's going to take over their body, and then they're taken over. It's like a possession. So then now you have the possessed spirit in the human's body who says, I can only control this vessel for as long as it's awake. So they just start ripping up skin and eating their organs, pulling their organs out. And I like to think even further that the human may still be alive in there, feeling all of the pain and feeling all of this, while the spirit possessing them doesn't feel anything, and it's just forcing them to experience the suffering. So the person becomes a helpless passenger in their own body while this spirit controls it. So I think the lines at the end of the story are the spirit or the demon or what have you speaking to the researcher as the person's inside as just a victim of this whole thing. That's how I always feared this story.
I mean...
And I also thought that maybe if they're in there for like 30 days or a longer period of time, they take permanent control, or maybe they could possess others, which leads to the last lines that say, so nearly free.
Yeah, I mean, I love that theory. The theory of that, too, it makes the ending monologue feel a lot more like The Exorcism whenever it's like, we are legion and stuff it's talking about.
Exactly.
But I also, at the same time, too, the idea of, like, these people that are, like, having to endure this pain and stuff, that's even more hellish. I mean, like, that's even more demented, that, like, that's, like, what I feel like a demon would want to do in this situation of possessing somebody. Like, it's all about, like, it's like them reveling in the idea of, like, torturing you.
Yeah.
You know, like, they're probably giggling and all that kind of stuff, which makes it, I mean, there's so many little moments that I think could play into that really well too, like the whispering and stuff.
Yep.
I wish there was more little whispering in those kind of things, and like the build up of this of another entity, vicariously speaking through you. I think can become more and more apparent, and they can like. I think the longer that they're trapped inside, or not, the longer that they're manning this vehicle of somebody's body, they become more in control of it. They become louder. They're able to like speak more coherently.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So I love that idea. I think that's really good. Now let me ask you this in terms of your theory here too. Do you think the gas at all could have opened up some kind of receptor for a demon, or put them in a space, or do you think that just because the gas, or do you think that just because the gas is keeping them awake and they're not able to like get their basically build your defense with sleep, like you're saying, that they were more susceptible to being possessed?
Oh, it could certainly be that maybe the gas is causing some kind of almost hallucinogenic effect. Maybe it's causing them to open up their brain to different spiritual paths or whatever. For sure. It's just in my theory, I think it's just the act of not going to sleep is what allows these things to take over. In my theory. Now,
That's
of course, the gas could do something.
I think that's more coherent for sure. I think that the idea that maybe like, because obviously the idea with like sleep health and stuff, like if you don't get really, there's like so many horrible repercussions with not getting 8 hours of sleep every night. Like there just is. Like you lose like years off your life if you do it too much. You know, like you'll go insane. You're more susceptible to like all these other mental illnesses and stuff. So the idea that being continuously awake and not being able to not being able to fortify your mental state makes you so much more susceptible for like basically some kind of other entity to be like, oh, perfect, here's a vehicle for me to drive. That seems to make total sense to me.
Yeah. I think so.
I think that if you have, which first off, that's a great theory, man. It's really, really fun. I just like it makes all of the criticisms that I have for this. It feels like
go ahead. Open up the hater mode.
Feels
go
like
for it.
No. Well, first off, let me tell you something. I need to get this out there because I'm a narcissistic piece of shit, and I have to make sure that people know my opinions. All right.
That's what. Hey, we're YouTubers, right? What's new?
It's true. Which I have some notes here. Which it says. It's mostly just about wanting more information. I think that if you said that it was if this was dedicated more as a field report, then I think that you could have done something to allude to either that paranormal aspect of like them getting possessed or something. Some people might get their kicks off this just being like the human mind, basically turning to soup, and this is like the essence of like hate, like the essence of pain and the essence of fear or the essence of anger that have just like boiled down into these subjects. I do think that the paranormal aspect of it's really fun. I think that if the paranormal aspect, I like being ambiguous, because I think if you paint too much of a picture of this demon, it could get into some clown-like territory where you're like, oh well, I want this thing to be, benevolent. I want it to be like something that you could picture yourself to be its own version of like the version of it that you would be afraid of most, right?
Yeah.
But I do think that just some of the stuff that I had planned, like, we have that 9 days in, the hysteria begins to start. That's when the guy tears his vocal cords. That's whenever, that's whenever people start whispering. The feces start going there. There's a lot of parts there where when I was reading, or when we were reading through it, that I just wish that we got to hear more about like what the scientists were saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
more character build up, because this is the reason why. if you have a story like this, and it isn't a field report, then it's just a story. Then you're kind of wanting to hear, okay, well, what's the perspective of what's going on with, are the scientists like, okay, well, this is weird. Obviously, they know we get little glimpses that they're like, this is not going right. But at what point are we humanizing the scientists in a way that we're supposed to also perceive as being evil people because we're dealing with prisoners, right? But can you sympathize with these prison guards in a way to where you start out by being like, I feel so bad for these prisoners, and then by the end of the story, you have flipped the lid where you're just like, please God, put them down. I think that there's something fun with a narrative you can do there. Yeah. But the reason I was going to say that too is that there's other moments too that just like little things like not so much that I'm like, oh, this would have been better, but whenever they go in to retrieve the bodies, I think it's on day 15.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been cool if we did get to know who the scientists and these guards and these nurses were early on. You kind of almost get like a Chernobyl situation where it's like, the people are getting infected, or people are getting, like the radiation is going to get them in some weird way because the precautions aren't there. So whenever they walk in to grab these people, I mean, you assume that they're probably in gas masks and stuff, right? They're probably hazmat suited up. That's what some of the pictures have here. But like, if these people are struggling, and I mean they're breaking their bones almost like Baki characters, you'd almost think that like, what if they kind of tore through the mask a little bit? What if they fucked something up to where some of that gas got leaked into people who weren't supposed to be in on the experiment, and that maybe they started to like force themselves into the room as well? How does that trickling effect? Because it's reading so much like a zombie case that you almost want to see that slow infection take over to somebody who maybe has been rational this whole time, is now also giving in to some of these more depraved feelings that these subjects are as well. And you can have like maybe like an Evil Dead situation where the person in the basement is yelling and screaming and taunting you, the same way that these people that are in the gas chamber could be doing the same to people that are working there. Some of these people that are like, I'm just a nurse, I'm not suited for this stuff, right?
Yeah.
I think I think just more introduction of the characters could be cool.
That's
and
fair.
Also same with a lot of the biological talk and like the lexicon of things they're saying with like these really in-depth, like extremely specific like organs getting ripped out, or like all of these things. I just wish that more of that was introduced earlier, just to be like, this is what it's supposed to do to the brain, or like things to where whenever it didn't feel like just such a huge juxtaposition. Not that it's even bad that they were that specific, but I just wish it was a little more thorough throughout. Like it's like what the scientists are expecting this to do to the brain. Like even earlier stuff of like how is their skin reacting to it. Just little things that build up to those extreme things where it's like, yeah, now their organs are on the ground digesting food. I think that you could have gotten away with that and not have it have been so cartoonish if you just would have introduced more of that like language earlier on.
Yeah. I get that.
The clock is ticking, Ethan. And now the fate.
And also, the biggest thing now, looking back at it, is I wish that the commanding officer was at play earlier on, pushing the bar a bit more. He comes in towards the end, and he's like this figure that's like kind of does a fucked up thing at the end, but it seems like it would have been fun to have that boogeyman, like you're saying, at the beginning. Who is it? We're establishing that like this is obviously a means of torture, but would have been cool to just see or to have that figure come up and be like, maybe like, you know, introducing more gas at certain parts, like maybe he was the element that went wrong, or he was the kind of like basically the devil that opened up this hell for these people. I think would have been nice for that story structure, and also I think that it just it gives a bit more it gives a bit more weight to somebody who's continuously pressing the gas on something, like by gas I mean throttle, for the story, because for me it is an experiment, but at the same time I never felt once that these scientists were malicious. I don't know if you felt the same, but I never once felt like, yes, they're prisoners, but I guess I didn't ever picture them as being anything more than like researchers, which maybe that's just me being a fucking idiot, but
I mean, they're doing human experiments on political prisoners, so
true.
I don't know if they're the most like, sure, they catch, I guess, morality at the end of the story when it's, well, also not really, because the reason the researcher shoots them and shoots the officer is so he doesn't have to be locked in there with them too. So it's not a moral decision; it's just a self-preservation decision. So I don't know. They were.
I guess that's true.
After they were screaming and ripping their vocal cords and smearing their feces on the windows, they were cool with it. Then.
I mean,
they were cool with
I'm not
cutting
even
people open on the chain like that.
That's true. Well, to me, I mean that's fair. I think that like they're obviously doing bad things. There was just like a couple moments where, one, how much of it is them, like, I don't know. I'm trying to justify the thought I had, which is the idea that's like how forced are they to do these things? Like, not. I hate to, I hate the idea of like the argument of like they were just following orders, but how much of this was like, it's mostly just the introduction of the commanding officer at the end, to where I'm like.
Yeah.
How big of a play is that in there? Which really doesn't matter, but I guess it just, by figuring more of that out of like them, if it was more of a field report and if we could see these scientists saying more of like the lab rat aspect of it, like they're not looking at these people like as humans, they're looking at them as lab rats, which that's what they're doing in this. But I don't know if we, I don't, and maybe this is just me, and there might be, the comment section might be like, okay, you're a fucking psychopath. But I guess it's just the idea that it's like we never get a moment with them ever doing like even like talking about them in that subject matter. It's more of them just like retelling the horrors that's happening in front of them. So to me, I was almost reading it in like this weird sympathetic, like horrified voice the whole time, even though it probably was very analytical and very like, shitty of like, oh, this, like they're doing a field report. I do think that, like you said earlier, I do think that if it was in that field report vein, that maybe it would have made them much more cold and stuff. And I think that even if that was the case too, it kind of makes the people that are freaking out and stuff, they almost become these like crazy people that you want to see, see them break through their cuffs and stuff and break out of their imprisonment and fucking kill these people. I just didn't have a way to sway. Right, so either way, it's like by the end, I feel like I'm like, I feel like as characters, the prisoners are evil, even though I don't know if that's, I don't think that's the correct like thing to think. Does that make sense?
I see how like your kind of mindset shifted to that the prisoners became evil. In my opinion, that's because of the possession aspect in my head. But it could also be that if that's not the way the story is interpreted, then it could be, you know, the actual prisoners themselves became evil because of that primality that was unleashed in them because of the lack of sleep.
I still like the theory that you're saying with the possession. I think that by the end, I'm not looking at them especially after you said the possession thing. I'm looking at them as demons and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
But the problem is that because there's no delineation of getting to, you know, and I don't think you have to personally get to know these people, but I do think hearing more sympathetic screams and cries at the beginning, because you do have them screaming and stuff, but understanding what the whispers are, seeing that transformation happen, I think would make it more.
This is gonna be a rough one.
I would be more sympathetic to these people instead of just being outright horrified, because I think that the story does a great job of being like.
They can.
You almost feel like you're one of the
they can
scientists
take all
in the
that
room,
knowledge, come
being
straight
like,
from the north
"Good
all
God,
the way down into
this is crazy."
one country
Right?
at a time.
Instead of feeling in an odd way, which maybe this is just me being a fucking psychopath, I less sympathetic and more about me being like, these people are terrifying me. Like the beginning goes by so fast that the human aspect of the story is quickly shoved aside. They kind of immediately go into feral apes. So I felt like I was more just horrified than sympathetic with
that makes
these people.
That makes sense. I get that because they become so different from humanity. I can follow that. I think the story would do a lot better if it would just be if you slightly reorganized it to be a field report. So you open up like log day 1, log day 2. You give it, and then at the ending, because all that you had mentioned in the initial logs is there was an encounter, researcher executed guard as well as 2 awaiting whatever, and then at the end you would put words said or transcript. You'd have a transcript of dialogue, and from there you could have conversations between the nurses and stuff that get across what happens during the surgery and all that, and then you could end the entire thing with the dialogue of the patient on the stretcher, so nearly free. That could be the final part of the transcript. So,
absolutely. I do think that would have translated better into a audio. This would actually, if it wasn't that field report thing, it would be great to hear an audio storytelling of it with other actors and stuff, because it could be you have your main character who's your main scientist guy who is writing these things out, and then you get to be this is a recording from the booth or whatever, and you could add more to the story. I think a lot of storytellers could come together and add to the story with their own performances, and have those guiding lights of these kind of one-liners that are peppered through the story. You could have more people kind of add to this experience. But I strongly agree with that, though. I think that this would have been. I think it would have been more effective as a field report. Yeah. That would have been a really fun medium for this. That being said, though, the whole thing is great. I mean, this is the first story we've covered so far where I'm I would love to see this into a mini-series or a really well-done movie or something. This would be a great movie or mini-series. I'll probably lean more towards mini-series. Just because I want more of the subjects. I want more of the character development and growth of these people and stuff. Because I really think that if you have all of that stuff and you can either get behind or hate characters, because that's such an important part of stories is you hate a character. That's a great emotion to have with storytelling. If you're able to convey that, you've done something very well. And I think that if you're able to hate these scientists, or maybe you're able to sympathize with them, or whatever, or you could hate or you could be sympathetic towards the prisoners and their change is so sad and horrifying that it's almost it's terrible. I do think that it would give this so much more weight, and I think it would make the ending much, much more impactful.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot you can do with it. I think it could be.
Well, how many of them motherfuckers that take out?
After looking over that whole story, my memory
They came with 2,000 troops. That's insane.
I still like it. I still like the direction. I like the pacing. Sure, some stuff could be changed, I think, to make it more impactful. But my theory I had then, I think, still stands up now. Yeah, this is still a banger. I still like it. This is a good one.
Yeah, no, I think your theory is
what
great.
it is at this point.
Honestly, so far, I mean, I know we're only on episode 3, but even some of the stuff that we've been introduced and stuff, for a story that is this short, you get so much detail. The flow is great. This is such a great quick read. That's why I think also it's so accessible, is because you're not getting bogged down in the weeds and stuff with people that want more of the monotonous, boring bullshit like I do. That's just my preference. I love that, but I do think that this thing is like, it's just like just a fucking a hit and run. I mean, it just blows by, boom, and then it's gone. I mean, it's really really fun. I and when I say things like anime moment, or when I say things like Monster Energy Can, I can see how very easily that could be perceived as negative, but mostly I think it's just me trying to find a fun way to be like, this is schlocky.
Yeah.
And I like that. I think schlock is very, very fun. I mean, like, that was one of, like, the positives we had from the Jeff the Killer thing, was that, like, because it was so outlandish, it makes it a fun read. Like, just because something isn't, concrete and not, totally perfect doesn't mean it's not valid. I think that this story is great. Structurally, well, first off, it's just leagues better than, obviously, Jeff the Killer and stuff. But I think, like, this is just, I love that it's embedded in history. I think it's going to be, like, something like a fun, timeless piece. And I think, like, as people kind of stumble upon it, I still think, like, for years and years to come, it's going to have that fun allure to first-time readers of, like, is this, how real is this, And there's just that fun little spark that I think these creepypastas have. And that's what makes them so great. It's just like that little itty-bitty spark where you're like, oh, my God. Because it's not a big published thing. It's just something that exists on the internet, and I think that's really, really special.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we
did too. It goes hard. It stands up. In the current catalog of Creepcast recollections, we've got Stairs in the Woods. I'm a search and rescue officer, and Sleep Experiment in the banger category, and then we got Jeff the Killer in the.
It's got to be in the Hall of Fame of bad.
The Hall of Fame of bad, yeah.
I think that it's not, because I think that it's not bad to where it's like I would never read that. It's bad as in it's really funny.
It's so bad it's good.
And it's historical.
It's the room of creepypasta stuff.
Yeah, no, it's I think it's worth it. I'm very excited too for the next episode, which I know I've seen comments about people saying they want to know the subjects we're talking about beforehand, so I think the next one we have scheduled is Baraska.
Yes.
Baraska.
And also, if anything changes, we have a Twitter account now at Creepcast.
Yes.
Is it at Creepcast or is it Creepcast? Hold on, I should probably know this. As the
well, the thing is that Creepcast isn't the most original title, so we have had to combat the deal I see here.
Creepcast Actual is the name of the app currently. So,
Creepcast Actual.
So yeah, go there, and if there's any updates or you want to know what the next story is early, go follow that on Twitter and you can get in on that.
Yeah, we need to do also. I'd like to make a Reddit or something to where people can submit story suggestions, or even I am a big advocate for people writing their own stuff and being able to read some viewer stories or something like that.
That could be pretty cool. I'm sure just throwing it out there, someone will do it on their own if we don't want to oversee it. But if we do want to oversee it, we could probably make that happen. I never made the Wendigoon subreddit. People just went ahead and made it,
Yeah, same.
On their own. So maybe maybe that will happen. But who knows? There could already be one for all I know. But yeah, more fan interaction, more stuff like that sounds cool. Thank you all so much for the support you've been showing the show, by the way. It's really insane.
Awesome.
One thing I want to mention that I forgot. I talked about mentioning this with you, but I didn't think of it till now. So, the author of the Search and Rescue Woods, I'm a search and rescue officer. I've spoken to her. Great person, great writer. And I meant to shout this out when we did the episode about her work with the Stairs in the Woods, but I forgot to mention it then. I wanted to mention that she is currently doing a lot of caption work and is very proud of the work she did on The Amazing Digital Circus. Is that the name of the series?
Yep. It's insanely popular.
Yes.
Series,
Yeah. That's I haven't watched it yet, but I just see the view count and I'm like, oh my word. So fun internet lore. The author of the Search and Rescue Stair in the Woods did the caption work for that, and she also does a lot of other caption work. You can reach out to her if you're interested in getting her work from that series on any of your stuff. She's very talented. We'll probably have her on in the future whenever we invite writers and authors on to speak. But yeah, I wanted to mention that because I didn't mention it in the previous episode. So just letting you all know about that.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think that's great, and I'm, I think it's another successful episode.
I think so.
Buddy.
I think that was pretty cool. 3 in, and we haven't destroyed the channel from the inside out yet. So doing pretty good. Doing pretty.
Bridge you guys have to cross.
Yeah, they're both wildly reckless.
Yeah.
I hate the father more just because I feel such frustration
I
for
agree.
him. But yeah, but you're right. The mom, if not the dad, the mom should have been like, no, duh.
But
yeah.
At least the mother has done something heroic.
She has.
Being like,
She
"I'm
has
not
had
gonna
some
fucking do
level
this."
of like standing up to him, right?
And now this is the first time technically we've read in the story where the dad is like beaten up a little bit, and he's just like, it's been years, and that's the first time. I don't know.
Man, like, what's Tommy's respawn time? Like 8 hours or something? All right, well, I'm in shifts now. I'm sitting at the front door, sniper rifle. Every time he walks up the driveway, I'm stacking bodies right there.
It's kind of like the end of Jeepers Creepers 2. When
They
know when the monster's going to come back, and he's like, all right, I'm going to be right here waiting for him. Whatever. It's normal. Just don't talk about it. Is how this feels.
Yep, I think so, and I don't like it. I was sitting in my room with the door closed. It was almost dinner time, and everyone was downstairs getting ready. I could hear Tommy laughing from the living room. I looked down at the magazine one of my friends at school had given me. It was Playboy. No.
You're a little too young to be reading that, brother.
We poured over the pages at school, giggling and ogling over the naked women scattered through the magazine. I'd never seen anything like it. It was my first exposure to that world. It made my heart race in ways I enjoyed, and I felt something weird, but pleasurable stirring inside of me. I'd asked my friend if I could borrow the magazine, and he had let me. I adjusted myself on my bed and pored over the nude photos. I couldn't believe women actually let people take pictures of them like this. I don't want to read that line. He felt the thing that you would feel. My heart was racing as I felt hot, my cheeks flush. I don't like where this is going, man. If it gets too explicit, I'll read over it quietly and summarize. I was on the last page when I heard something from the doorway.
What you got there, Matt?
I whipped my head up, jumping, the magazine falling to the floor. Tommy was watching me from the door. I hadn't even heard him open it.
Nothing.
I mumbled, snatching the Playboy up and shoving it under my pillow. Tommy walked over to me.
I didn't hear you come in.
I mumbled, blushing. Tommy reached under my pillow and pulled out the magazine.
It's not nice to lie. I've told you that. Why were you lying to me, Matt?
I swallowed hard, heart thundering against my ribcage.
I'm sorry.
I trailed off miserably as Tommy thumbed through the pages. He glanced down at me.
Do you like this?
I knew I couldn't lie to him again. I nodded, my skin flush, eyes on the floor. Tommy smiled and sat down next to me on the bed. One hand's touching his leg, and Tommy says,
"Do these pictures make you feel good?"
I didn't look at him as I nodded again. Suddenly, alright, yep, not reading that at all. Nope.
The quote! No!
Oh, gosh. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, no! Okay.
Do not go read this. Do not go look this up. Everyone.
No.
As a 50% owner of Creepcast, I am using my veto power of authority to say, for I think the first time, we're not going to read this section. I'm going to quietly read it as I continue to react, and then we'll summarize.
Okay. I just got done reading it, and I want to fucking throw up. Basically, he was going to teach the kid how to have alone time, but he doesn't end up doing it, and he kisses him with tongue in his mouth at the end. That's it just seems so unnecessary. This is like,
yeah, this is way too explicit.
Yeah, that's bordering on snuff. I mean, like, you took a good thing and you just went too far. Just skip to the next part.
Yeah. So it actually doesn't go as far as it will. There is one part in there that I think is worth noting to what his existence is. His mouth tasted of rotting fruit and decaying meat.
Weird. What a weirdest rotting fruit.
It's almost like on the inside of this plastic shell, he's like a rotten corpse.
Or he's like a reanimated, just like pile of flesh. Or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. Like he was some accursed like husk of meat given a shell.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's an interesting character. But yeah, that whole segment is way too graphic. No, I'm not reading that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm going to say it's there if you want to do it, but I think for a public, it just is unnecessary.
Yeah, I wouldn't go read. I mean, the thing that you think would happen is implied. It doesn't go that far, but it's described in detail. Yeah, so
to the point where it's just like I don't really know what that gets you.
It's honestly like no decorations like porn dialogue, but in a very like horrific scenario involving a 10-year-old, mind you. So yeah.
And
no
it's
thanks. No thanks. So July 1994. As the days marched closer and closer towards July, my family developed a silent, optimistic, a desperate plea to make this all stop, to make it all go away. My mother and father made sure there was no reason for another hard lesson. They bent over backwards for Tommy, begging through clamped teeth that we'd all make it to July without another incident. On July 3rd, we woke up to find Tommy Taffy was gone. 5 years to the day. Woo! Woo! He's gone. Yippee! We couldn't believe it. He had simply vanished overnight. We checked the entire house, my mother weeping tears of relieved joy that the nightmare was finally over. Over checking every inch of the house 3 times over, we met in the living room, embracing one another as a family. Tommy had moved on. The sentence was over.
Like you said earlier, does it not almost be even more effective if you just stopped the part where I looked up, or it's just like what you got there, and then it just cuts to that?
As the days march closer and closer towards July, infinitely works better. Lets you imagine what happened. Lets you imagine the terror. Yeah, I think so.
You've completely cheapened everything that you were trying to do there by doing that. And, like, it's upsetting and it's gross, but I don't think it's effective.
You went too far to get the shock value moment. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I don't think... I think the story becomes infinitely better if you remove that. You know what I mean? You don't... it's just gratuitous.
You don't need to
it goes into snuff. I mean, it's unnecessary.
Yeah, I agree. My father called out of work and we went away for 2 weeks to the beach. During those 2 weeks, I kept expecting to wake up with Tommy standing over me, a horrific smile on his face. But he didn't. It was over. My parents did their best to rebuild our family, fill in the cracks that had been going during those long years, and loved them dearly for it. But some monsters just can't be forgotten. I don't know what Tommy Taffy was or where he came from. I don't think I'll ever know. What was his purpose? Why did he do those awful things to us? I pore over the possible answers until my head splits and I find myself crying. Memories too much to dig up. Some things are just left dead in the past. But I haven't forgotten what my father told me in the hallway that awful night outside my sister's room. I'm 33 now and have remained unmarried and without children. I can't risk it.
Good man.
I mean, it sucks, but yeah, absolutely. I can't risk that monster coming back into my life. I've never understood why my parents chose to have kids. Thank you. They both have been exposed to Tommy during their childhood.
I should
so
not
why
have
Stephanie in
this.
it? Maybe they didn't believe he'd come back. But I believe it. And I'm terrified. Because you see, yesterday my sister gave birth to twins.
Oh no!
I should not have won that.
God. If you just would have removed the snuff part from that, this becomes a top tier one. That's a great ending. That is the ending to this.
I didn't even consider that.
That is so...
That she never heard. She never heard that message in the hallway.
Exactly!
She wouldn't know. She wouldn't know. She'd think it was over.
The dad's so fucking incompetent. Of course he's not going to, hey, in the 5 years, I'm just not going to tell her. Why would ya?
Oh,
you fucking
man.
idiot.
And they tried to not bring it up, so they never told her, and then she had kids. Oh, man. What a great ending.
What a great ending.
What a solid ending.
Man, I gotta say, especially, it's a great length, too.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect.
Really easy read. If you get rid of the snuff thing, I dare say that's a top contender.
It's top 3, I think, without it. With it, I don't know. It drops more to the middle because it just went too far. It took the biggest thing the story had going for it, the nuance around what was happening, and then spelled it out too much. It didn't need that.
It's like it's just one of those things where it's like, dude, I get it.
Yeah. It's like, oh, really? that's what was happening? I didn't know. Yeah.
I think if you read it the way you said, with just skipping right, I think it flows better. Also, I want to say too, if you read it that way too, like I don't know what Tommy was or where he came from. I don't think I'll ever know what was his purpose. I think if you do that and you keep it all ambiguous, I think that it makes this entire last preamble hit so much harder.
Oh, as I pour over possible answers, I find myself crying. Yeah. Too much to think of.
Yeah, that's what it was. That's what it was. Because it's like, obviously, something traumatic happened, right? I don't think as the reader, I need to have that all spelled out to me. I think that allure of the imagination from reading this is you're opening up so many questions and doors that I think make it more impactful. But that last end part, you know, I don't want to keep harping on it because I know this, like, we get it, it's bad, but what a great fucking ending. Because you see, yesterday my sister gave birth to twins. It's crazy.
I'm reading the replies right now because you know there's Reddit comments and someone. Someone's like, I don't know if I've ever hated something as much as I hate Tommy, and then quotes the part about the abuse to the daughter and says, seriously, screw that guy.
No shit.
Really?
It's definitely some 10-year-old who was like,
who else thought it was kind of weird when he pinched your cheeks?
Yeah.
What a monster.
Seriously, what a jerk. That guy is a meanie.
Also, I don't know if so this is about 8 years old, this first one, and it's by someone named Elias_Withrow.
Yeah. They link their their Facebook at the bottom.
We'll obviously leave that in the description stuff, but I gotta say, for a monster that is personified to be something about what I would say is generational trauma in that way, or especially how trauma like that can repeat itself, I think it's extremely effective. I think it's like very, very creepy. It doesn't go too over the board with it, but I like the one little. If you could have gotten that, if you could have gotten that description of the rotting fruit and meat,
put it somewhere else
in a different way, I think that would have been nice because I like that. I like that it was just like a little. It was a little spice.
Yeah.
If each time you heard something different about him, I think it would personify him too much. I think that like his outer appearance is already so uncanny. I mean, honestly, even too, picturing him as a giant Funko Pop character, like, fucked me up. Not even gonna lie.
Put it somewhere where, like he gets too close to his face and his breath smells like rotting meat or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Otherwise than that, though, at the same time, I guess if there was criticisms about him, I do wish that there was more to his character besides just being this creep. Which I think even if you're trying to do something where you're trying to make a monster personified over that kind of over that kind of subject matter, I kind of wish that there was just a bit more with him, because the entire time it was very kind of one-notey of like caressing cheeks, like putting fingers through hair. At one point, it was just one of those things where I'm like, what exactly is this end goal? Like, what is the purpose of this guy? And I wish that there was maybe something that made a bit of sense in that regard.
I think I'm okay with no purpose per se, because you can imagine it as like a curse maybe that befell people. You could imagine it as like maybe it's some kind of like, maybe it's a demon that just does this to like random victims or something like that.
Sure.
I don't think it needs a purpose per se. I think maybe it needs a finale.
Explore beans with ease with a removable bean hopper. The Espresso Collection by KitchenAid.
Do you mean by that it just needs better closure than being like, oh, we woke up and he was gone?
More so, there needs to be a final step, I think, after the 5 years. Maybe, even if it's something as simple as, like, there's a rune carved on the door. I mean, maybe that makes it too expressly old world deity. Maybe like, when the 5 of them leave, they all have, like, a branding. They wake up with a branding on their chest or something. It's something that implies, like, a finality to it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it makes it seem like Tommy in the last week was like, well, I guess I'll just, wait out my tenure and then I'm on to another house into this,
like you've been marked. You know, by doing that too, it's something too where if you've been marked, you can never remove the mark.
Yeah.
Like it's permanently on you, which is also kind of another...
Which leads back into the trauma thing.
Exactly. Yeah. It's something that it was forever staining you kind of thing, I think is interesting.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. Is there a way too where if you could do, if it is a curse, right, is there a way you could break the curse?
See, that would be the
or like a thing of like you have to do some kind of ultimate sacrifice to do it. Like I forgot what show it is, but there's one where it's like you have to cut off your fingers. You have to cut off a finger, and it counts as you paying a debt. So if you don't do it, you have to like endure all this stuff, or you could just cut off one of your fingers, which you know, in something that isn't. It would be hard to like just be like, I'm gonna just cut off my finger because that would suck. But for something like this, could there be something better or something? Where maybe it is castration. Maybe you have to castrate yourself.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Something with actual weight where you're like, holy fuck, like that would be hard. Do you think that would add to the story, or do you think that like it just being a 5-year curse where there is no rhyme or reason to it, but you are just a marked one is more horrifying?
I think it being a 5-year curse you can't get out of is a terrifying thing. Again, I just think there needs to be some kind of like final swoop to it. Not that we have to understand it, but that it's something that Tommy understands.
I just picture that his, much like a cartoon character, his teeth would be, it's just like one large chunk. Kind of like a old Cartoon Network character or something.
Yeah, most people depict him as a Ken doll, basically.
Oh, interesting.
That's what most depictions I see are.
I wonder if the blonde hair thing has to do anything with like, if that's inspired at all by like Jimmy Savile or whatever, if you remember him at all, but he was like a notorious child predator in England.
Yep, I know you're talking about.
Goofy like that. I'm honestly glad we read The Third Parent first, because then when we were first starting this, we had his name was Tommy Taffy was the next one. And that one starts off with, some of you may have read my son's account, The Third Parent, and now it's all from the perspective of the mom, and that's going to be a lot more interesting of a read, knowing that.
Oh, okay, all right. So hold on. Oh my gosh. All right. So I found Elias, the author, Elias Witherow. I found his Reddit, right, and he has a compilation of all his stories. He did a short story a while back that I remember reading called "Feed the Pig," which is like a feed the pig. It's pretty widely regarded. I don't remember all the details of it, but I remember liking it when I was a kid. It's about like a man walking through hell, if I remember right, and it was pretty freaky. I remember. So he did Feed the Pig. So I have read his work before, and it turns out, looking at his subreddit, there are 4 parts to the Tommy Taffy series, with what we just read being part 1, and then part 2 being the prequel that we started on earlier.
Little intermission here. So we are now going into His Name Was Tommy Taffy. This is now the prequel to The Third Parent, which this is all from the perspective, like you were saying, from the father of the last story, who is the most hated character in Creepcast history. I'm already calling it.
Definitely the most hated. I mean, like, equal level of evil is some mentioned, but not really as annoying. I agree,
yeah.
And I will say about the first story, great writing from Elias Witherow. Just like I said, just like a tweak about some stuff at the ending. Other than that, just stellar. Very good.
Amazing ending.
Yeah.
One of the most powerful last couple lines from some of the stuff we've read.
Because I didn't even think about that. I didn't even consider the concept.
Around, that didn't even, like, it didn't even cross my mind. All the chaotic stuff happening, that whenever that came back in, it was just like another huge blow to the chest.
Yeah, it's just like a hard pitch straight to the chest.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah.
So we're now on to the part 2, which is a prequel of the story, effectively, called His Name Was Tommy Taffy. So, some of you may have read my son's account, The Third Parent, about what happened regarding the monster Tommy Taffy. After reading it, crying over it, I felt compelled to write this. Not here to defend my actions.
Yes,
not
you
here
are. Yes, you are.
I did what I had to so that my family would survive.
No, you didn't.
I knew what Tommy was capable of.
Mm-hmm.
I knew what we'd have to endure.
Fuck you. The first thing I said, after we got that, I'm like, fuck you.
Get him off the stage.
So help me God, if he sways me to, I'm gonna be so upset.
But I also knew that if we could make it 5 years without pissing off Tommy Taffy, we'd come out of the nightmare alive. How did I know that? Because I had already lived it. I'd already been exposed to what that thing was capable of. I'd seen Tommy's Kindler. I'd seen what pushed his buttons. I'd already done my 5 years. Like I said, I'm not here to defend myself. What happened to my family is unspeakable, but we are alive. No, instead I'm writing this so you can understand why I did what I did. That's what an explanation is. Why I chose to let Tommy do what he did to my wife and children. After you hear my side, after you read what I went through, then you can judge me. God knows I deserve it.
I can judge you already for your actions, dude.
That shit has, those like Facebook posts girls will do that'll be like, only God can judge me, you know? Like
Yeah, it's like, whatever, dude.
Why are we called Northern Tool and Equipment and not Northern Tool and Tomfoolery? Unlike the big box stores, you get the heavy-duty stuff you want without the lightweight stuff you don't. Northern Tool and Equipment. Get serious.
Tommy first arrived on my street when I was 7. I was an only child and lived with both my parents in a middle-class neighborhood. It was a mellow slice of the American dream, like a cut of apple pie under a smothering layer of vanilla ice cream.
Fuck you. Also, I want to say, do you think he was more surprised too because our Matt in the original story was 6? So do you think that they were surprised because maybe they were like, he shouldn't be coming for another year if he was 7?
I understand how... so the only way I fully think that Spence knew Tommy Taffy was coming for his kids is if something happens in this story where an adult tells him, oh, he comes every so-so years, whatever.
Right.
If this was his only interaction, I would almost understand being like, oh, well, I guess that just happened once, right? Like, you don't know it's generational.
I think there's going to be people on the street that are like, oh, well, I feel like the rules are going to be explained to others, and it's passed on to him, and that knowledge is what I think is going to happen.
I gotta say, this Tommy Taffy's a pretty interesting, like, horror movie creature, right? Like, you mentioned Cheaper Creepers earlier, but it does remind me of that a lot. Like, generations have to prepare for it and stuff.
Yeah, no, I think so, too. I'm very curious. I mean, we saw in IMDb there is a third parent film. I don't know if it's super indie or what, but I wouldn't mind checking it out.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I'd watch it. The concept has me sold. I think it's a terrifying idea. Like, he has to
The visual is really fun, too.
Our street was in a secluded residential neighborhood in the far corner of our sprawling development. There were 6 houses in total, and we were a tight-knit bunch, both the parents and children. In the summers, we'd have cookouts, and in the winters, we'd have Christmas parties. It was almost like our block was one big family. Everyone looked out for one another. Everyone was generous and considerate. It was a different time when people trusted one another. But our picture-perfect life shattered, he arrived. I'll never forget it. We began July 1969. I had just gone to bed, my 7-year-old mind exploring my imagination, turning thought into dream. The moon was a warm slice of yellow in my window, an expanse of stars winking down at me as I drifted off to sleep.
Imagine being this descriptive and this flavorful with your text, explaining why you let your children and wife get raped by a monster. Hello? What a fucking psychopath.
I know that my wife and daughter were horribly abused by this monster.
Yeah.
My block was like an apple pie, you'd say, almost like the vanilla ice cream.
My 7-year-old mind exploring my imagination, turning thought into dream. The moon was a warm slice of yellow in my window. It's like, shut the fuck up, dude. God. I hate him so much.
I could hear the TV in the living room, a comforting reminder that my parents were still awake and the monsters under my bed would stay away tonight. That's when I bolted awake by a knock at the front door downstairs. It was such a sharp contrast to the comforting murmur of the TV that my mind went on full alert as the noise echoed in the house. I sat up in bed, irritated, clutching growls, my teddy bear. I heard the heavy footsteps of my father walk to the door, probably expecting a neighbor. The familiar creak of the front door was followed by the muted murmur of conversation. I could hear my father's voice speaking, interrupted on occasion by another male voice I didn't recognize. My mother joined the conversation, and I could hear my father getting angry. Okay, so it sounds like here his father does not know who Tommy is, right?
Yeah, I don't think so, and he's having an actual rational, response to it. And we do know from the previous story...
No, you can't come in my house. What are you talking about? Yeah,
Yeah, and we know from the previous story that the dad died doing whatever, so I'm hoping that still
his dad
remains
was cool
a hero
awesome.
in this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping.
Minutes stretched on as the mysterious late-night visitor continued to talk with my parents. I slid out of bed and went to my bedroom door, peeking my head out to listen. I still couldn't make out the words, but I could tell my father was getting furious. He started yelling, and I heard him demand that the visitor leave our house or he was calling the police. It got very quiet then, so quiet I could hear my heart beating in my chest. Then I heard my mother begin to cry. It was soft. So soft. It scared me. The nighttime visitor was saying something to my parents. His voice lowered. My mother continued to sob. After a moment, my father said something I couldn't make out. Immediately following, I heard something slamming on the wall downstairs so hard the pictures in the hallway crashed to the floor. slapped a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream, heart racing. What was going on? My mother let out a pitiful noise, and I could hear her pleading with someone. There was a scramble of feet, and then another loud bang against the wall. The intruder was saying something to my parents, his voice oozing with authority. I strained to make out the words, but it came to me in a jumble of soft noise. After another couple minutes of agonizing fear, I heard my father call down for me. My heart was a wild drum beat in my chest, and I bit my lip, hand shaking.
A lot of dead
Why did he
bodies at
want
this
me?
gate.
What was happening? My father called again, his voice trembling slightly.
It kind of reads like Tommy is mimicking his dad's voice.
Oh, yeah, I see that. Slowly, I pulled the door to my bedroom open and walked to the edge of the stairs. I realized I was clutching Growls, my teddy bear. I could feel the soft of its fur growing damp. I looked down the stairs to the front door and I froze, eyes going wide. My father was gripping his throat, wincing, tears in his eyes. Something I'd never seen before. My mother had her arms wrapped around herself, moisture staining her cheeks. But that wasn't what captured my attention. It was the stranger standing next to my parents, staring up at me. He was in his early 30s and wore a white t-shirt, which read in red font, "Hi!" His hair was blonde and cut short. His two blue eyes, pools of glowing brilliance set in a sea of snow. And then I noticed the oddities of this intruder. His skin was impossibly smooth, plain pink sheen of absolute perfection. His nose wasn't so much a nose as was a nub jutting out of his face. His lips were twisted in a smile and revealing white strips where his teeth should have been.
Hi, Spence.
He called up to me, his voice cheerful.
I'm Tommy Taffy. I'm going to be staying with you for a while.
Clutched Growls to my chest, quivering, begging my parents for guidance. Instead, they cast their eyes to the floor, clearly shaken. I didn't know what was happening, what had been said between them, but I could feel danger in the air, thick and malicious.
Come on down here so I can get a good look at you,
Tommy said, waving me forward. My father's eyes suddenly met mine and I gulped. Even at that age, I could interpret the look he passed on to me. Be careful, son. Cautiously, I walked down the stairs, never letting go of my bear. When I reached the foot of the stairs, my mother reached out for me. Tommy stepped in front of her, smiling down at me. He squatted down and ruffled my hair, his immaculate skin looking almost polished and waxed at this proximity.
Cute little fella, aren't you? Oh, who's that you got?
He asked, gesturing to my bear.
His name's Growls.
Tommy grins.
Of course he is. I'm gonna help your parents for a while, so I'd like the three of us to be friends. Me, you, and Growls. You think that'd be okay?
Again, I looked to my parents for help, confused and shaken. I had no idea what was going on, who this was, why my parents looked so scared. He seemed nice enough, but the way my father rubbed his throat told me otherwise.
Boop, boop.
Tommy chuckled, knocking gently on my head.
Hey, I asked you a question, Spence. What did you do to my daddy?
I whispered, immediately wishing I hadn't. Tommy's mouth remained a frozen smile, but his eyes darkened ever so slightly. My father reached out and grasped my shoulder.
Spence, son, it's okay. I'll talk to you later about it. For now, Tommy's going to stay with us.
And that was the start of a 5-year stretch I can never forget. Okay, so here's my theory. The dad sees the guy at the door and is like, what the heck, get out, I'm calling the police, whatever, and says the mom starts crying. I bet the mom experienced Tommy.
Oh, and she had told him about him once before.
Yeah.
In the past. I wonder if he's like, oh, I know who this is from what your mom said.
Exactly. I think that's why it said he shot a look at my mother. Because the dad had a normal reaction.
He slammed the mom and the dad, right? Or did he just slam the dad twice?
I think it's just the dad. I think the dad was fighting, and he just kept picking him up and throwing him into the wall.
Yeah, like by his throat or whatever. Like maybe he tried pushing him, he just grabbed him and threw him into the wall.
Yeah.
Probably looking at my eyes.
How did that happen?
Well, have you ever heard of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, the UFC?
That's the bloody thing they're trying to ban.
This guy is the best he has ever seen.
Do you hate each other when you fight?
Absolutely not.
much?
No. Please welcome in his Octagon debut, Winning is the best feeling there is. It's 40,000 people and they're cheering you on. There's no other high like it in the world. No contract, no money? No money. Do you have any stronger pain medication? Advil? Advil? Don, would you like?
No.
They're handing them out like candy. Let's all get in. Let's all, everybody get in. Get down. Can you take this picture for us?
Yeah.
What are you thinking at the beginning of the fight? It's simple. Am I going to hurt him before he hurts me? Yes. I'm sure this Grand Prix to crown the greatest fighter in the world. He has come back from the brink. Let's see if he can pull out a victory over Mark Coleman. Have you spoken to either about fighting such a good friend for a life-changing amount of money?
I just need you to let me in.
Always about you. Only about fighting you.
Let's fucking go. Big strong man.
Think he wants your autograph?
Sure, no problem. No fighting.
A few days passed, and soon I learned, through whispered inquiries, that Tommy Taffy had visited everyone on our street. He was in our home, but also in theirs. I learned this from my eventual wife, Megan, who lived across the street from me. She told me that some strange guy was living in their house. After she described him, I deducted it was one and the same, Tommy Taffy. I will say, I know that this story was referenced in the first part, but this is a cool sequel because it honestly reminds me of Aliens in that it goes from like a singular instance to like several.
Yeah. I mean, this is something too where if the character, depending on how one-note he is, it could be something to where it's just like he could be anywhere all the time, generationally. How does this thing just go about through the years?
Yeah, like it's like a djinn or something, a malicious demon.
Yeah.
I didn't understand how it was possible, but knew to keep my mouth shut. Tommy had sworn me to secrecy. He swore everyone to secrecy. This was enforced by my parents, who told me in hushed whispers to never tell anyone about Tommy. I could tell everyone feared him. I did too. There was something unsettling about his constant smile, his slightly off features, and the cool, enunciated way he spoke and laughed. I didn't know what he had told my parents to keep them from going to the police, why they were allowing him to live in our home, but it must have been terrible. Yeah, I do wonder what he would have said, right?
Well, I mean, yeah.
Because if some of these people are like a patient zero of sorts, right? Or at least, like, they never knew about it as kids, then what could Tommy have said to them that made them just, like, live with it, right?
Yeah. You wouldn't expect every family to act the same, too. Like, there'd probably be some guy who's like, this is totally unacceptable and get killed right away.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. He has to say something to, like, lure them. Or, silence them, I guess.
We were a hostage in our own house. Of course, Tommy didn't keep us there, but we knew he would be waiting once we came back. At night, Tommy would sit us down and give us life lessons. He would tell us how to be good people, how to love one another. I remember one time during the first week, I looked out my front window across the street into Megan's living room. I saw Tommy there, speaking to her family on the couch. The Tommy in front of my family stopped speaking immediately and stared long and hard at me. Ooh. Then he went to the window and closed the curtains before continuing. Yo! That's
creepy.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, like...
I love that visual.
It's just you and Tommy, and then when you perceive another Tommy, your Tommy just like big eye stares, like drops it, shuts the window. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, okay, this is a pretty good sequel so far, because it's building off of concepts built in the first one without pulling away the punch, right? Without, like, giving the monster away.
I'm waiting to see what Tommy does and how that differs.
Yeah.
Because if it's the same thing over again, then I'm going to be, I think, disappointed.
fine if it starts as the same thing, but I think the multiple Tommies may lead into something interesting.
Well, that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
Yes, well.
During the evenings, as the fathers on our street came home from work, I'd see them meet briefly in the road, muttering to each other and casting looks over their shoulders. There was a mutual terror shared between them, an unspoken knowledge that they had to keep Tommy's secret, that getting the police involved would only lead to, well, nothing good. I imagined upon arrival that Tommy threatened our family and then showed some sign of physical dominance over the men. I remembered the banging against the walls and the way my father had gripped his throat. But what the hell did he say to them? Why did they allow him to infest our homes? Well, a month later I found out. They were plotting against Tommy. They were going to kill him. Cool. Based, cool, awesome dads. Yeah, that's more like it. August 1969. Again, I was awoken from slumber. I looked at my Spider-Man clock and saw it was after midnight. I scrubbed sleep from my eyes, grasping in the dark for brows. As I found my bear, I heard banging from downstairs along with several voices. I slipped out of bed and went to my room. The light downstairs were off, but I saw beams of light cutting through the black. Flashlights? I called out for my parents but saw their bedroom door was wide open. I knew they weren't in bed then. More voices from downstairs followed, along with scraping against the hardwood floors. I jumped as a bang shook the night and then the voices faded. Oh, like a gunshot, I imagine?
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. There's people going into the basement, I thought, frightened. The basement was unfinished, an expanse of empty cement. Why are they going into the basement? I thought. Silently, assuming my parents were down there, I crept to the first floor, clutching growls in my chest. Sure enough, the basement door was open and I saw light reflecting off the dusty floor. I could hear my father's voice, and then the familiar voices of our neighbors. They were speaking to someone. They were angry. My heart froze in my chest as someone laughed from the depths of the cellar. Making sure to not make a sound, I slunk to the open door and descended the first 2 steps to look out at the scene below me. Tommy was bound to a metal chair in the middle of the room, surrounded by the 6 pairs of parents that lived in our neighborhood. Their backs were to me, but I could see Tommy's flawless face gazing up at them. Megan's father was there, his face a mess of bruises and swollen flesh. His arm was in a sling and it looked like his shoulder slumped like his back was in pain. I sucked in a breath as I realized one of the men was passing my father a pistol. The women stood by their husbands with grim looks on their faces. There was no disagreement among the executioners. Yeah. What a cool line. I love that. I'm just hyped about the idea of, like, you know, the women understand, but the men referred to as executioners. There's no disagreement among them.
There's no doubt in their mind that they're all like, this motherfucker has to die.
Yeah, kill it right now. Yeah, that's so cool.
It's time you leave our lives.
One of the men said, looming over Tommy. I recognized him as my friend Luke's father, who lived 2 houses down.
This is your last chance.
Tommy didn't even struggle in his rope bindings. That ever-present smile still on his face. He looked up at them. The overhead light illuminated his sparkling blue eyes.
I don't understand. I'm just trying to help all of you raise your children properly.
I'm not going anywhere.
A look passed between the parents, and then my father put the gun to Tommy's head.
You're not helping anyone. You're a monster. You can't come into our homes and threaten our children, threaten our lives. That's not how this works. All those threats you whispered to us while we were caught off guard. We'll look at you now.
My father spat on him.
Pathetic. Now you'll get yours.
My father shot him in the head. What a G. Yeah! What a guy. Just bam, Grandpa. I love it. It's cool. The report was deafening and I almost screamed, slamming my head over my mouth at the last second. Tommy's head whipped back as the smell of gun smoke spiked the air. It was silent for a moment, and then... In horror, I watched as Tommy slowly raised his head to stare back up at my father.
What the hell?
One of the women breathed, her voice shaking. There was no blood, no shatter of bone, nothing. Just a dark circle in Tommy's forehead where the bullet had passed.
What the fuck are you?
Someone whispered. Tommy's eyes spun to the man who had spoken.
I'm Tommy Taffy, and I'm not going anywhere.
My mother suddenly pointed the corner of the room, her hand trembling.
Gas. Get the gas.
Megan's mother went to the far corner of the room and picked up a small red can. I could hear the slosh of gasoline and I smelled it in the air. My father grabbed the can from her hand, his eyes wide and never leaving Tommy. Without a word, he upended it over the bound man, soaking him. Tommy kept smiling. Another father passed my dad a box of matches. My father struck one, his hand hovering in the air.
Go back to hell. Leave us all alone.
Yeah, I don't care if it's over the top. I love the dialogue of the grandfather.
Me too.
That's
I like
awesome.
it.
Go
I
back
like
to
it.
hell. That's awesome. Tommy grinned wider.
Hell is gonna seem like a fantasy when I come back for you.
That's a sick rebuttal. I'd be like,
Yeah.
okay. Alright. Sorry, Tommy.
The way he phrases it too, when I come back.
Yeah, like it's
oh,
like,
man.
yeah. I'm not fuck yeah.
My father dropped the match and Tommy burst into flame. He didn't scream, he didn't thrash, he simply burned. As his face began to melt, his eyes shifted, and suddenly he saw me.
Probably looking at my eyes.
How'd that happen?
Well, have you ever heard of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, the UFC?
That's the bloody thing they're trying to ban.
This guy is the best he has ever seen.
Do you hate each other when you fight?
Absolutely not.
How do you know Mark Kirk? Oh, we go way back. But he's a buddy of mine.
Come on, baby. Too much?
Never.
Too much?
No. Please welcome in his Octagon debut,
Winning is the best feeling there is. It's 40,000 people, and they're cheering you on. There's no other high like it in the world. No contract, no money?
No money.
Do you have any stronger pain medication?
Advil?
Advil? Don, would you like
No.
handing him out a candy? Let's all get in. Let's all, everybody get in. Get down. Can you take this picture for us?
Yeah.
What are you thinking at the beginning of the fight?
It's simple. Am I going to hurt him before he hurts me?
This Grand Prix to crown the greatest fighter in the world. He has come back from the brink. Let's see if he can pull out a victory over Mark Coleman. Have you spoken to either about fighting such a good friend for a life-changing amount of money?
I just need you to let me in.
Always about you. Only about fighting you.
Let's fucking go. Big strong man. I love you. Think he wants your autograph?
Sure, no problem. No fighting.
Steam a whole lot more than just whole milk. With the Espresso Collection by KitchenAid.
Woo, man.
So it's just picturing his like eyes and his like wax face just kind of like glancing over and seeing the kid.
Yep. And he's like dissolving. And the laugh, like there, the laugh directed at him is like the kid shouldn't have seen this. Right now, he's made a mistake. Heart exploded in my throat. I fled back to my room, tears streaming down my face. From the safety of my bed, I eventually heard the neighbors leaving, relief in their voices. 2 weeks later, Tommy came back.
Oh shit.
So, man, okay, for one, I love this prequel. This is great. This is a great setup. I love the direction. I love the descriptions, all that stuff.
Dialogue is sick.
Dialogue's sick. It's fun. It's cool. It honestly does feel like Aliens in the way so far it goes from like, you know, the horror to action almost, but while still keeping a horrific tone. I really like it.
I like how Tommy is, I don't know, like, he's, like, this is gonna sound weird, I guess. He's a lot more manifested in this one. Like, I like, he's a lot more tangible.
Yeah.
They're doing more with him. He isn't just, like, this omnipotent spirit. Like, he is, but they are interacting with him in a more fun way.
Yeah, you can touch him more so.
Yeah.
Also, 2 weeks later, that is a crazy long respawn time. you can just kill him every 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I'm curious to see what happens.
September 1969. We were eating supper. A sense of normalcy returned into our home. My parents never told me they had murdered Tommy, instead opting to inform me that his visit was over and he went back home. I still caught whiffs of gasoline about our house, but kept my mouth shut. I was just happy my family was okay. The sun was setting, and the dying orange light filtered in through the living room window, stretching out across the floor to cover the dinner table. My mother and father sat at opposite ends of the table, chatting about their days. I could tell they were still shaken, but I admired the way they were trying to return their lives to what it had been before Tommy showed up. Also, that's so cool, the idea of like a husband and wife were like, yeah, we burnt this guy to death in our basement. Anyway, how was your day? How was work? Like,
well, they're just strong parents too.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's the thing is like they understand what's best for their child. Like if they told him, what good does it do to like?
It's not gonna help.
Burden him with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're cool. I love the grandparents. As I shoveled mashed potatoes into my mouth, the front door exploded open. I spun around, jumping as the wood splintered and the hinges creaked. I dropped my fork, eyes growing wide. It was Tommy